All right, everybody. So, voice cracks just as I start the stream there. So, hey, everybody. Thanks. I'm Eric Manning. I just hit puberty, apparently. And yeah, I'm here to talk to you about your doubts about Christianity. So, no, I just giving myself a bit of a hard time there. Had the Michael Jones voice crack. But yeah, in this stream, we are talking to you if you are a non Christian or a Christian and you just have doubts about specific areas that I think give us reasons to think that Christianity is true, right? And so, talking about the resurrection of Jesus, I'm willing to talk about that. I'm willing to talk about Jesus' own self claims, his claims to be God. We could talk about that. Talk about the argument for miracles and maybe even modern day miracles if you're interested in that. We could talk about how Jesus fulfills messianic prophecy. We could talk about the conversion of Paul and how that's evidence for Christianity. And so, yeah, any of those topics, we could definitely discuss that. I'm probably not going to go too far away from those 5 topics. Those are the topics that I always talk about with my channel. That's why the channel is called Testify. The point of my channel mostly is to talk about the testimony, the evidence that we have that Christianity is true. And so, just waiting for some folks to show up, I guess. Man, Dean Batop says this live gonna be super. It's gonna be super duper. Koopa stomping Koopas. Sorry, that's my really lame Chris Pratt attempt there. I'll be tuning in. Can't call in tonight, most likely, but looking forward to hearing the discussion. Koopa, looking forward to talking sometime. You are my favorite devil's advocate in the comment section, so I appreciate that. Bible with Cubs, let's go. And then we have Neji. I don't know if he's still around. Or Christianities love to idolize Jesus. Well, you can't really idolize God. If Jesus is God incarnate, then we are worshiping the one true God. If anything, you guys are the ones who worship a man, and that would be Muhammad, because you put his commands above God's own commands, and that would be that would be committing idolatry. And so, Mr. Yogurt, I don't even know what happened. I'm not even sure what's going on, Mr. Yogurt. And so, but yeah, thanks for tuning in. And so, the link is in the comments. But for those of you who don't see it, again, non-Christians or doubting Christians can join here. Kevin says Jesus is God. That is right. Amen, Kevin. And yeah, so he's convinced. So this stream, he wouldn't be one to call in. But anyways, and then Mato said he was going to be up or not up for this earlier. And now he is up. And so thanks for joining. So everyone, thanks for joining so far. Let's see. Depends on what you mean by God. Most people believe that Jesus is God the Father, but Christians would say that's heretical because people believe that Jesus. Oh, well, yeah, there are oneness Pentecostals that believe that. I think where they really run into trouble is when you get to John chapter 8. We'll just pull that up while we're waiting for somebody to call in. And so, oneness Pentecostals, I don't know what they do with this verse. Let me just pull it up here. Just sharing the screen. All right. So when we're talking about oneness, sorry about that. When we're talking about oneness people who believe that there is no Trinity, that the Trinity is basically a heretical belief, and their group, and only seemingly their group, who gets baptized in the name of Jesus only, is the one who gets the faith correct. And so they believe that Jesus, the Holy Spirit, and the Father are all one person, and they are God, and they're just 3 different manifestations of the one God. But where I think they have a huge problem is when they run into John chapter 8, verse 17 through 18, where Jesus is speaking, and it says, "In your own law, it is written that the testimony of 2 witnesses is true. I am one who testifies for myself. My other witness is the Father who sent me." And so Now, if you look at the surrounding context, Jesus is talking to people and he is making some self claims. And he basically calls himself the light of the world. And let me just move this here. Sorry for the awkward silence. Yeah, it says, I'm the light of the world. Whoever follows in me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. The Pharisees challenged him. Here you are appearing as your own witness. Your testimony is not valid. Well, what are they talking about? They're going back to Moses. And they're talking about you out of the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, so shall every word be established. You can't just bear testimony for yourself. And so the Pharisees are challenging him and they're saying, you are your own witness. Your testimony is not valid. Jesus answered, even if I testify on my own behalf, my testimony is valid, for I know where I came from and where I am going. You have no idea where you came from or where you're going. You judge by human standards. I pass judgment on nobody. But if I do judge, my decisions are true because I am not alone. I am not alone. That should be a problem for oneness believers right there. I stand with the Father who sent me. Okay, so is Jesus sending himself? Is Jesus is the Father? Wouldn't he be alone? Right? That doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And it says, but if I do judge, my decisions are true because I am not alone. I stand with the Father who sent me. In your own law, it is written, out of the testimony of 2 witnesses is true. 2 witnesses, 1, 2. I am the one who testifies for myself. So Jesus is giving testimony. And my other witness is the Father who sent me. So how in the world would a oneness believer get around that? I have absolutely no idea. And so yeah. Anyways, Kevin is just spamming the comments. All of a sudden, Jesus is the Father. I don't know. Bro is just kind of like trolling at this point, or just kind of joking around, being sarcastic. But Kevin, if you wanna discuss it, man, step up. I mean, that's what this is for. This is a call-in, right? And so I'm not just gonna be answering live chats here the whole time. And so this is just till somebody comes up. But yeah, I don't see how you get around that. 2 witnesses. Okay, well, that doesn't make any sense. You wouldn't just say, yeah, I'm a witness, and also, hey, I'm a witness. You don't go to court and testify about something that you saw, and that counts for 2 different people. That doesn't make any sense. And so I don't know how you would get around that text and many, many others. And so it's a weird belief. I've met a lot of oneness Pentecostals. They're often very sweet people, very sincere. And so my dad was friends with a oneness pastor, and they were nice enough to pray for my mom when she was sick and had cancer. They even came and visited and laid hands on her and all that other kind of stuff. But that was nice of them. I guess I appreciate the thought, but the belief itself just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Plus the women, they have the whole, they don't cut their hair. So some of them, they have that Tower of Babel kind of haircut there. And so they put that bun up way high because they have not cut that hair, and it usually goes long down to the ground. You can always pick them out, and they wear the long skirts, no makeup. Again, honorable people, good people. They even have some pretty stellar worship. I've noticed. I don't know if you've ever heard like the Pentecostals of Alexandria on YouTube, but like some of their worship is, I don't know, maybe that's just my groove because I am Pentecostal. I'm just Trinitarian, more in line with like, say, the Assemblies of God or Foursquare. And so someone said Marge Simpson is oneness. That's right, Ethan. I guess so. I don't know. She's got the long skirt. She dresses oneness. I think she bears her arms though. Oneness ladies would never ever bare their arms. And so, but yeah. All right. This is my son, Jesus. Apparently, according to Kevin. Yeah. I mean, what do you do with that? Jesus is being baptized, right? This is my son with whom I am well pleased. Like, this is me with whom I am well pleased. And then God descends, the Spirit, who is also Jesus, descends upon Jesus. And then a voice speaks out of the clouds, which I guess he's a ventriloquist or something. It's a very strange view. It just seems like it doesn't really take scripture at face value at all. And so there you go. Let's see. Anybody stepping up? I do have some slides I could go through. I was going to save those for Saturday, but if push comes to shove, we'll give people a few more minutes to show up. Kevin Gianna, Patrick Passium again, Patrick. That's right. Oh, stab you in the face, Patrick. Anyways, going too far. That is an actual Lutheran satire quote, though. But yeah, I don't think I've seen Donald and Connell take on the oneness people. They've taken on the Mormons, they've taken on the atheists, they've taken on Jehovah's Witnesses, they've taken on I think Richard Dawkins is the atheist there, but I haven't seen him do that. So Hans, make it happen. Make it happen. Make it happen. Let's see. See, even Koopa knows that Jesus isn't the Father. He's not even a Christian. Come on. Come on. Come on. Lutheran Presbyterian. Yeah, I don't see too many Lutherans or Presbys. Pentecostals. That's a group that just doesn't go along together. And so, yeah, I've not seen too many Lutherans or Presbyterians be really open to the whole charismatic movement or anything else like that. So, that would be a weird combination there. Koopa with super chat. What is your problem with Lucan dependence on Josephus? I just don't see any good evidence for it. I know Steve Mason has written a book on it. It's actually on my shelf right behind me. But the problem that I have with it, the biggest problem that I have with the whole idea that Luke is depending on Josephus, is that if he's borrowing from Josephus, then why does he often contradict Josephus? And so, or at least allegedly contradict Josephus. And so the whole census issue, for instance, right? There's this alleged contradiction between the date of the census and who is over the census in Luke's gospel and Josephus. That's a big one, right? Like that's probably the go-to skeptical argument against the reliability of the gospels right there. I don't think that it's like an irreconcilable kind of contradiction. And I've talked about it in a stream before with Dan Christopoulos, like, I don't know, I think it was several months ago in response to Dan McClellan. And I went through why I don't think it's a contradiction. But if Luke is borrowing Josephus, man, he would have made that a whole lot smoother. Generally, if you're copying somebody, you're not trying to just openly contradict them about historical facts that you could just be called out on, right? And so there's that. There's also the whole idea of supposedly Theudas being out of time that a lot of skeptics raise against the reliability of Acts, that there's an error there, that Theudas is placed in Acts chapter 5, verse 37 at the wrong time. And so again, if he's copying Josephus, why does he apparently contradict him? And so I have a big problem with that. And then when they do have some overlap, it interlocks in a way that doesn't look like he's copying at all. He's not drawing any kind of attention to, like, look at these facts, I really know them. And I think being really crafty. A really good example of that, let me show you. I went over this in a previous stream, but I can do it again real quick. Let me find some slides here real quick. Fortunately, my internet is crawling here. Let me pull that up. All right. Bear with me, guys. My internet is lagging. I don't know why. Hope that's not a problem. I need like the Avery hold music, I don't know what his hold music is. I'll have to pick a different song. Do 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 meow 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 meow. You just gotta meow sometimes. I don't have the cat cam like Mike Winger here. Sorry, you're stuck with Timu Mike Winger at the moment. Let's see. Just see. Nope. Priest. Here, let me show you this example here, Koopa. You may know where I'm going because I know you watch the streams, but I will share it with those who don't know. Okay, so in Acts chapter 23, there's this kind of weird question that arises, right? Why didn't Paul know who the high priest was, right? And so Paul appears before the Jewish council. He's struck on the mouth at Ananias' command, Ananias being the quote-unquote high priest. Paul gets sassy. He unloads on him, and he says, God is going to strike you, you whitewashed wall. And then Paul is rebuked back, right? Somebody standing by him says, "Hey, are you going to revile God's high priest?" And then Paul says, "I didn't know he was the high priest." He quotes scripture, "You won't speak evil of the rule of your people." But the natural question arises, right? Why doesn't Paul, who is a student of Gamaliel, a Pharisee of Pharisees, recognize the high priest? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, right? Oh, I'm not even sharing the right. I'm not even sharing. Hold on a second here. There we go. You guys still see me? I was cutting out there for a second. So why doesn't Paul know that Ananias is the high priest? Josephus explains in Antiquities, chapter 20, we find that he was appointed the high priest, but he was basically going around like a mafia gang enforcer, sending people to basically shake people down to collect their tithes, right? And the governor Quadratus got wind of this, and he didn't like it. He was getting complaints from the Jews, and so Ananias was sent to Rome and appeared before Quadratus, right? And although he was able to weasel his way out of the charges, he was suspect enough that he was actually removed from office. That was one of the things that Jews really did not like, this Roman interference with the high priest office. The Romans would change out high priests like I don't know, like teenage girls are changing their clothes, multiple times throughout the day. I have a teenage girl at home, so this is just what they do. I don't know. That's what I came up with. Anyways, keeping it awkward. But he was replaced by a guy by the name of Jonathan, and he became the high priest during Felix's term, right? And so this is around that time when Paul is appearing before these different rulers, right? Jonathan, as it turns out, was actually murdered in the temple. Again, this is all according to Josephus, leaving the office absolutely vacant. And so no new high priest until Ismail, the son of Phabi, who was appointed by Agrippa, which there was a gap there, happened. And so this conversation occurs exactly during that vacancy. Ananias was acting as if he still had the office. So a lot of people think that Paul was throwing shade here. He was being sarcastic. So when he says, "I didn't know he was God's high priest," he was basically being cheeky, right? And it fits with his use of sarcasm. And so now what you would have to say is that, okay, Josephus very carefully, very craftily figures this out, or not Josephus, excuse me, Luke, reading Josephus very carefully, very craftily, is reading all of this in Antiquities, and you see all the references right here. And then he's going to invent a story that actually like didn't happen, because there's no way he could be a witness if he's writing after Josephus, right? This would be, in the early to mid second century. And so, because that's when Josephus would have been circulated. And so he's gathering all this information and he's going to craft this story and make it fit, and then make this really subtle, sarcastic dig that not a lot of readers will absolutely necessarily even pick up on. But then this same Luke is not going to read Josephus carefully enough to make the census not look like an apparent contradiction, or not make the whole thing with Theudas look like an apparent contradiction, or bring up a ruler by the name of Lysanias when we do find a ruler in Lysanias. He comes 100 years about, I want to say 40 to 100 years before. I'm just going off of memory. And a lot of people were like, "Oh, he's making an error. He's referring to Lysanias, a Lysanias that doesn't even exist." And it was only until we found an archaeological dig that actually went back to a second Lysanias, right? Which I think is kind of a way to explain the Theudas contradiction, right? Because there could be more than one person with the same name, right? And so I don't think he's like this crafty and yet this big of a bundler. Bungler, not a bundler. He's and so somebody's going to make this kind of mistake. It doesn't really make sense. There's no unified picture of an author there, and so it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense, right? He's either really crafty or he's really stupid, and try to say that, well, no, he's actually kind of both. Doesn't really make sense. And so yeah, I just don't find it to be a very good hypothesis at all, especially when we just have an abundance of evidence that I talked about in the previous stream. Go back and watch the Big Axe stream, that I talk about all of the evidence that Luke was a traveling companion of Paul. And so what now you have to do is you have to kind of say that all the undesigned coincidences are probably better explained by Luke just copying Paul and Paul's letters. But then you have the same problem there. there's apparent tensions between the book of Acts and Paul's letters. And now you're just multiplying two hypotheses that don't really fit. Where I have one hypothesis that just explains all the data in one fell swoop that I think is just better and more simple. So I hope that makes sense. I'll try to follow up on any other comments that you might make. The chat is kind of rolling a little faster now that we've been going for a few minutes. And so we're the earliest Christians. This is meh. We're the earliest Christians believers because they saw the risen Jesus besides the apostles. Well, Paul does talk about there were 500 people who apparently saw Jesus. I believe that there was more than just the 12 that saw Jesus appear in Galilee. And so, I may talk about that at some point, but that would make sense. It's a remote location that Jesus sends them there while he appears to his other disciples in Jerusalem in private, where it's a little more of a dicey situation, and more in an urban situation. And so, I think we know that there were people that were witnesses to the beginning of his ministry, up until seeing him after the resurrection. That's how Matthias replaced Judas, as they needed somebody who was also a witness. And so there was other people who saw the risen Jesus. Of course, there was the women who saw Jesus, but I think most of them were people who were receiving the apostles' testimony, right? And so they knew about the miracles that Jesus had performed in the area, and then we just read in Acts that they get up. They basically blame the Sanhedrin and the Jewish rulers for his judicial, basically murder, execution. Of course, we know Jesus laid his life down. They didn't take it from him. And so, there were other early Christians besides the apostles who saw the risen Jesus. And so, because Paul tells us about him. So anyway, let's see. The Lysanias thing. Let me see. You could interpret it a couple different ways, Koopa. I didn't put up the chat where he says, the second Lysanias thing is kind of contested, though, isn't it? I don't know of it being all that contested. And so I wonder if I have a slide in here about it. Because I think I talk about it in here. Hold on a second. Problem with doing historical apologetics is there's just a lot of facts to remember. One day I'll be like my friend Jonathan McClatchy, who's like the Logos Bible software wizard and has 10 million bookmarks and all these different things there. But so Luke names Lysanias the Tetrarch of Abilene in Luke chapter 3:1. As I said, skeptics scoffed at this because Josephus records a Lysanias who was killed decades too early. It looks like a big historical blunder. But then the Abila inscription was turned up. It mentions another Lysanias ruling Abilene during Tiberius' reign, which is exactly when Luke said. And so I don't know. I don't know ambiguous who the reference is to Augustus Lords. I don't see why we couldn't accept it as the Lysanias that Luke is discussing, because why not? We have somebody who has a good historical track record. Again, go back through the Big Axe stream where I go through dozens and dozens of historical facts that the evangelist Luke gets absolutely right over and over and over and over again. And so, why wouldn't you give him the benefit of the doubt when he proves himself to be reliable in so many different things? There's, like I said, Colin Hemmer in the book, in his book, The Book of Acts, in the setting of Hellenistic history, talks about 84 different facts that Luke gets absolutely correct regarding titles of local officials, local geography, slang, trade routes, just, walking routes, different things like that, over and over and over again. And so it's Luke is a pretty good, credible historian. And he's talking about a second Lysanias. And so, what other historical source do we have? I don't think it's an unreasonable inference whatsoever. So, yep. Mato, Logos, hands down. There's so many other books and references and all kinds of things that you can use there. He says, what's your opinion? Logos Bible Software, eSword. Definitely Logos, hands down, because there's just so many different resources you can download, highlight, tag, bookmark, tag between different books, and all these different things. And so Yeah. So I would go with that one any day. I'm not the expert at it. Like I said, my friend Jonathan, he goes through these doubts calls. I join him live with them, and we do these kind of two-on-one calls with people who doubt Christianity, have questions about Christianity, and he just can go through all of these facts so quickly in it, and it's like I've told him that Logos needs to hire him. And so yeah, so Koopa says it's a weird coincidence that Luke happens to mention Judas and Thutis in sequence, and the Egyptian and the Sakari. Man, I don't know. That's the best argument that this whole thing has, right? And so it's kind of like, again, for all the reasons that I argued against it, like it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Maybe they just had the same information, and just because it's a coincidence that the sequence is similar, doesn't mean a whole lot. I think I have a blog post. Let me look it up if I talk about the Sakari. I know Michael Jones talked about this in a previous video. Let me look it up. Let me look it up. Koopa's making me dig here with all the into my archives here. Egyptian. I'll see if I have it. I might not have it. I might have to address it in the future. Yeah, let's see. I think I got it. No, I don't think I do. Hold on 1 second. Try through this here. Okay. Let's see what I wrote. Did I say anything? No, I guess I didn't. Okay. I did write about this before. I'm surprised I didn't put it in the chat, Koopa, and you can read it if you want. I'm surprised that I didn't mention that in there because it was something that I meant to address. I'm aware of, but I don't really think that that's that weird of a coincidence, especially with everything else. It just seems like if you're going to hang your whole argument on like, well, that's a weird coincidence, it's just not very strong. I don't know. So let's see. Anybody going to join the stream? Surely there's a doubting Christian out there somewhere, or somebody who wants to challenge me again, talking about, is Jesus God? Did he claim to be God? The resurrection of Jesus, did it happen in history? Talk about miracles, modern day miracles, if you want to talk about that. Fulfilled prophecy. Paul, was he a true apostle? Was he a fake? Was he a phony? Surely, I get so much pushback in the comments with all of these things. Surely somebody is lurking saying, come on, I want a piece of Testify. I'm going to show him. I'm going to bake him and cook him and all the other things and other Gen Z lingo. Ayo, chat, are we based? Chat, are we cooked? I don't know if you guys saw what's that guy's name? Cliff doing the Gen Z slang. Skibby dibby toilet ruse. Do I need to play it? Oh, there's somebody. David Wood the Third. David Wood the Third, if you could, in the private chat, just say who you are. If you're a Christian with doubts, or if you are like atheist, skeptic, Muslim, agnostic, Buddhist, whatever, just give me a quick idea of kind of who you are and I can bring you up. Probably should have put that or mentioned that earlier. We do have somebody, it looks like they're going to join. Just give him a few minutes. It says David Wood the Third, and he's dressed up like a ninja. So I didn't know David Wood had a grandson, a ninja grandson. But he's very stealthy. He's very quiet so far. Again, David, if you're listening, put it in the private chat just super quick who you are, what your question is. This could be a sentence or two. Just be doubting Christian resurrection, something like that, you know. All right, we've been going a half hour. Nobody has called in yet. I might have to shut this down pretty soon here. There he is. There he is. I thought it's a call live. Yes, it is. I'm just asking you, just identify, are you a Christian, like a doubting Christian? This is for doubting Christians, or somebody who rejects the Christian faith. And so just kind of like say, hey, I'm agnostic and I want to talk about, did Jesus claim to be God, or something like that. So it's right in the thumbnail. There's 5 topics that I'm willing to talk about. So just say which topic and just what you believe. Take you 2 seconds. So, and then I'll bring you up. I just want to identify people because, I think we've all watched enough of Avery's streams to hear some people say some crazy or do some crazy things. So I just want to make sure I'm not letting up crazy trolls. All right, there we go. All right, David, what's up, man?
So like basically, I was like thinking about like when Jesus said like before Abraham was I am.
Mm-hmm.
So that referenced when he was talking with Abraham, when God was talking to Abraham about how he is like a protective shield for Abraham, and how he is the promise of the fruit of the fulfillment of Abraham's like progeny or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if that means that Jesus is God per se. I think it means that he is a manifestation of like God's like word. But I don't think like being that means like you're God per se.
But if he was going to claim to be God, and if I am is like the divine name that was spoken to Moses, like say the burning bush, I'm like, how else would he say it? He's just
I
saying he's a
mean, you
manifestation
would
of
claim. I mean, if you were to claim that you yourself were God, you would claim straight up that um you would say something like, "I am the truth beyond all names."
he
Uh,
would he would say, I am the truth beyond all names. That would
yeah, he
be
would
that
say
would do it for
something
you.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, why? Like, why would he need?
Why?
If he's talking to Jews, right? I guess in
Uh huh.
a Jewish context, and they're like
Because.
the whole Exodus like started with this encounter with
Mm-hmm.
Moses meeting God in the burning bush, who we also
Yeah.
read is also the angel of the Lord, right? Who is like I believe because it just kind of prefigures the Trinity, even in the Old Testament, like the God is multi-personal.
Yeah. No, I don't
Um,
like. I don't disagree with the Trinity. Like in my theology, like I do accept the hypostasis. Like
okay.
it's just I think that Athanasius, right, like he had an idea of God, but he was constrained in his like Greek understanding of God, that he could only say that Jesus is God in the sense that like Jesus is like divinely connected to God, but he couldn't like say anything else because like his Greek vocabulary constrained him.
Well, I'm confused then because if you don't disagree with the Trinity includes Jesus as part of the Trinity.
Because
We would be like the Father is God, but Jesus is God, the Holy Spirit is God. They're the same essence, but they're not the same person.
I'm saying that each person is not the whole of God, because like I want to say something like
So like
Jesus
partialism?
is a faith, not it's not partialism either. I'm saying like it's something like Jesus is a faithful embodiment of God, because I want like a sword and shield theology. Okay, because Jesus said he is
What
the
does that
shield.
even mean?
Oh,
What does that even
it
mean?
is what it means, because like it's what Jesus like references himself in the prophecy in which he himself says
I'm
he
your
is the
shield and great
shield of
reward.
faith.
He
Like in
doesn't say,
Genesis 15, right?
yeah.
Genesis 15, Jesus says that he he is that shield. God says that he is that shield that protects Abraham, right? And
Okay.
Jesus says he himself is that shield, right?
Why couldn't he do that and also still be God?
Because I think he's saying that he himself is like the shield and not the sword.
Why would that distinction even matter? I'm
Because
confused.
I feel like um I'm open. I have like speculative theology that um
Sounds a little on the speculative side. How about
yeah,
this
but
though? It says like
I'm
Psalm
saying
3,
like
3, you Lord
I
are a
want
shield around me.
someone to be the sword of God. Like
All right. Um
like this I want the
I
sword of God to be the Father. So like each of them,
yeah.
so this is to be faithful for the Trinity, right? So each of them carries a different aspect, but each of the aspect is in full. So this is totally faithful to the Trinity.
Okay, I understand that, but I don't see why the symbolism. These are symbolic terms. I don't see why they would necessarily be like required for them to be the Trinity. This is kind of weird, man. It does say that you, O Lord, are a shield around me, my glory, the one who lifts my head on high. That's Psalm 3:3. Psalm
Yeah.
5:12. Surely, Lord, you bless the righteous, you surround them with favor as a shield. David says, Psalm 7:10, my shield is the most high, who saves the upright in heart. Psalm 18:2, David again calls him my shield, right? Okay, over and over. I don't really understand. It sounds pretty weird. When you're talking about speculative theology, this is kind of getting out into some definite speculation. And I think the chat is kind of being like, I'm a little confused. So, yeah, man, at this point, I'm just going to say thanks for coming.
Yep. I mean,
All
I
right.
guess, yeah, but you too,
Yep.
man.
Yep. I'm not sure what bro was on about, to be honest. He believes in the Trinity, but Jesus isn't God. What do you even? How do you even begin a conversation with that? So, um, yeah, that's something. That's something. 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 What do you do with that? What do you do with that? Some Christians, you just kind of wonder. A lot of just regular faithful church attendance will just kind of clear up a lot of people's problems. All right, so JHFX, Educio e Produccio de Videos. Hey, I want to talk. If you are a doubting Christian, I'll say this again because some people are asking if they want to come up. You have to be a Christian with doubts, like you doubt, and it's got to be the 5 topics. Remember the thumbnail, guys. So, resurrection. Did Jesus claim to be God? Does Jesus fulfill messianic prophecy? Was Paul a true apostle? Do Christian miracles happen? I'm willing to discuss any of those 5 topics. If you are a doubting Christian, I'm willing to talk to you. If you are a non-Christian and you disagree with any of those things in the thumbnail, then I'm willing to talk to you. But if you are like a stalwart believer and you just want to ask me a question, that's not this stream. I may have like an ask me anything at some point, but this is to either help people with doubts who are Christians or those who want to consider Christianity maybe, but they have some questions. They have some maybe issues with any of those topics that I have mentioned there. So somebody says no audio. Christian, yeah, if you could put in the chat like what your doubts are about, you can join. There's a link at the top of the stream. It is pinned. You just have to say like what it's about. It does need to be on those topics, right? So I'm not going to like get into like what do you think about the slaughter of the Canaanites or something like that. I'm not going to talk about Old Testament stuff. Not that that stuff isn't important. It's just kind of beyond what I normally talk about with the channel, and other people are better equipped to do that than I. But if it's New Testament kind of stuff, reliability of Acts, reliability of the Gospels, like I said, resurrection of Jesus, does Jesus fulfill messianic prophecy? Do miracles still happen today? Is Paul really an apostle? Just going to keep repeating those. And that's basically what these call-ins are going to be about. Any of those 5 topics, trying to figure out a way to do this to make it work. Because if you make it too niche down, nobody calls in. If you make it too broad, then everybody and their dog just wants to ask any kind of question about the problem of evil and what about God's hiddenness and different things like that. Again, those are things that are important, and I don't mind necessarily touching on those topics, but it's those five main topics that are history related, basically, or more biblically related. I spend more of my time talking about those things. So I see somebody popping up. Logan, if you could just in the background, there's a private chat to the right. Just tell me like who you are. Like I am atheist, agnostic, Buddhist, whatever. And then just like which of those five topics you want to talk about. So you just say, for instance, agnostic, resurrection, or something like that. And then I see Christian back there too. Whoever can just type in basically in a nutshell what your topic you wanted to discuss is, and I'll bring you up. Should just take a second. It's on the right. It says private chat. Or at least it's on my right. I don't know what you guys see. Do 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 do. I think Logan's typing away. Christian, again, if you can, but I'm starting to doubt a little bit. Christian, again, if you could just specifically mention like what the doubts are. Again, just remember the thumbnail, apostleship of Paul, evidence for Christianity, questions about Mormonism. Little off topic, Logan, little off topic. I'm going to bring Christian up first real quick. Stick around, buddy, if you can. I appreciate it. And so maybe put in there what your questions are about Mormonism. We could discuss it. But again, I'm trying to stick to the 5 topics that I put on the thumbnail, just to kind of keep things from going too off the rails. And so, all right, Christian, what's your question, man? How can I help you, bro? Christian, you're on stage. Christian, I don't know if you're muted or if your mic's not plugged in. Oh, looks like you unmuted and muted. Nope, can't hear you, bro. All right, I'll give him a minute. He's trying something. All right, for those popping up, I'll just kind of give a quick recap, just to kind of set the expectations. There are 5. Oh, I think Christian just joined. Christian, I think I can hear you. Can you hear me, bro?
I can hear you.
Okay. Why is your voice like that?
What?
Okay, sorry.
Is
Go ahead.
something wrong?
Oh, okay. It sounded like you were messing with me a little bit. You're probably fine. Go ahead, man. I'm sorry.
I have a really cheap headset, my bad.
No, you're good. I'm sorry.
Wait, let me just go back to YouTube real quick. So, I've been starting to have doubts about Christianity, kind of like the Trinity-ish.
Okay. Like specifically, go ahead.
Let me find the verses. I'm trying to find the verses right now.
You're good. Is it specifically like the logical problem of the Trinity? Is it like just because you feel like it's a contradiction or something like that, or?
Oh, no, I don't think there's any contradictions at all.
Okay.
I think it makes perfect sense. You
Okay.
know, I think it makes perfect sense. It's just I've been starting to doubt a little bit lately. I'm trying to find it.
Okay.
Because in John 14:28 it says the Father is greater than I.
Okay. And so is that does it have to be like ontological? Do you know what I mean by ontological?
No.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, you're good. Let me pull something up real quick because I actually just talked about this in the last live stream that I did here. I'll do this real quick. Again, it's a little off topic. So I'm gonna answer it, and unless you have something else, because I'm trying to stick with more of the historical kind of topics. Okay.
Yeah.
And so I will. This is more of like a scriptural kind of thing. And
Mm-hmm.
so give me 1 second here, because I'll just pull up some slides because I just literally talked about this, and you can go to that stream. Might help you there. And so when Jesus is saying the Father is,
Oh.
yeah, when Jesus is saying the Father is greater than I, that doesn't prove that Jesus isn't God, right? Because Jesus says the disciples should rejoice that he's going to the Father. Well, why is that? Because he's returning to the glory and power he had shared with the Father before the world began. Okay. And so think about it. When he says, glorify me with the glory that I had with you before the world existed, right? He's saying that before he he was incarnate, right? He had this particular glory. He becomes a man. Paul talks about that he lays aside, basically, he, even though he's in the form of God, he lays aside uh, some of the privileges, different things that he has, right? And he
Mm-hmm.
becomes a man. He empties himself and he makes himself of no reputation. He becomes a servant, right? He humbles himself. And so, but in Isaiah, we see that it says, my glory I give to no other. And so Jesus isn't receiving a borrowed glory here. He's actually in this verse in 17:5 when he's praying and he's saying, glorify me with the glory I had before, that I had with you before the world existed. He's just reclaiming that eternal glory that only God possesses. And then also just think about the context again in John 14:28. Right before that, he says, whatever you ask in my name, I will do it. Well, if you think about that for just a second, this would require omniscience, omnipresence, and omnipotence, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
if you ask me anything in my name, that's going to require somebody to be all powerful. How is he going to be present with them when they're asking his name if he's saying that he's leaving them, right? So that requires omnipresence. And then omniscience, he's going to have to be able to hear their prayer, right? He's going to have to be able to hear their prayer. And so then there's also John 14:29, where he talks about, I've told you these things before it takes place. And then he says, so that you would believe in me, right? And believe in him who sent me. So I'm paraphrasing that particular verse. But if you know your Old Testament and you think about that particular verse, it sounds an awful lot like Isaiah 41:22 through 23,
It
or
does.
48, 3 through 5, where he says that I know the end from the beginning, right? And before
Mm-hmm.
these things happen, I'm going to tell you about them, right? And so when he's saying that the Father is greater, that's a functional subordination in mission. It's not a difference in essence. He's just saying, I'm becoming a man, and as a man, I'm going to submit my will completely to the Father. But he's not losing his essence of necessarily being God. He's just choosing to become a man and humbling himself and becoming obedient to the Father. And so, Paul, if you think about, let's see, let me look it up real quick here. There's a similar kind of passage we see in 1 Corinthians. Oop. Where Paul is talking about the roles between men and women, right? Husbands and wives.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
he says, I want you to realize that the head of every man is Christ, and the head of a woman is man, and the head of Christ is God, right? And so if you think about that, like, is a woman like less of a human being than a man? Right. Of course
Uh,
not. Right. Right. They're
yeah.
not. They're, yeah. But are women to submit to their husband? Yes. Right. And then
Mm-hmm.
of course the husband is supposed to love his wife as Christ loves the church. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but there's not there ontologically, there's no difference. They're both human beings, right? They're both human beings. They have the exact same kind of human nature. All right. But functionally, one submits to the other and is in a position of authority. And so that's the same kind of thing I believe that Jesus is talking about with that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does.
Was it just a doubt about the Trinity? Did you have something else while you're up here?
Uh, no, that was just about it. I do relatively agree with everything you say. It's
Okay.
just that lately I've been having just a teeny tiny bit of doubts, but that
Sure.
clears it up a bit.
Oh, okay. Well, awesome. Praise God. Well, thanks, Christian. I appreciate you joining. And
No
thanks
problem.
for coming up.
I'm
Take care,
subscribed
buddy.
to you. Bye bye. You too.
Okay. Yep. Thanks. All right. Cool. Cool. All right. Let's see. Logan. I'm gonna Dwayne. I see you backstage. He says I'm unconvinced agnostic. Janata says he's a deist. I appreciate that. Thanks for identifying. Also say like what your question is about, like what you want to discuss, whether it's does Jesus fulfill prophecy? Do miracles still happen? Is Jesus raised from the dead? Did he claim to be God? You could say any of that, take a pick. I don't care. But just kind of put like what you prefer to discuss. I'm still working out the kinks on some of how I'm going to do that. So the only way that I can kind of learn is by doing these, even if it's a bit of a painful process. So, but anyways, Dwayne, you're gonna have to join. It says your cam or your mic aren't plugged in, so you want to fix that. I'll go ahead and bring up Logan real quick since he's been waiting, and then I'll get to Janata here real quick. And so, Logan, what's up, man?
Hey, just I got a question, I guess on two things. I was debating a Mormon and I was talking to him about, like false prophecies and stuff. And how
Sure.
Joseph Smith isn't really known for giving out too many true prophecies. And he's like, well, King David had a false prophecy of him running away from something. So I was like, how does that
Do
tie
you have
in?
specifically
You
the
know what I'm trying to
verse?
say?
Do you have specifically the verse that he's referring to?
No, I don't. He just brought it up how King David, he apparently God was like, "Hey, you're gonna slay these people or something," and then King David ended up running away.
Yeah, I would need chapter and verse. And that's
Yeah,
you just have to remember anytime that somebody's making a claim, then it's on that person to meet the burden of proof. And they're gonna have to give you a verse. They're gonna have to give you a chapter. Maybe you just don't remember at the time. And so I don't know of that particular one. And so I just can't really speak to that. I'm sorry.
for sure. And then I guess I got one more question if you're able to answer. Otherwise, I'll go.
Okay.
Um, the rock in the hat thing. Is there like any? Because I know like some people like they'll know like some prior knowledge and then they'll claim it as divine proclamation, like Muhammad with the science thing, how he knew all the Greek science, but he was like, "Oh, this is from Allah." Like, what do you know about the rock in the hat thing with Joseph
I mean,
Smith?
the Mormons will just admit to it. I mean, it was supposed to be the Umum and Thummim. I'm probably butchering the pronunciation on that. Although who knows how that's pronounced? I don't know. So, but basically, yeah, that was the original story. And then as it comes to find out, he is looking at a rock and a hat, and basically just kind of stream of consciously, supposedly dictating the Book of Mormon. And so they'll even admit to that. That's something that
Okay.
they just will say, yeah, um that's what we believe. I mean, that's what happened. They know that's the history now, so they can't really run from that. So they'll admit to that. Now, the thing is about seer stones back in that particular day, um, they were like something that people used and had this like superstitious belief that they could track treasure with these things and different things like that. And here is Joseph Smith, the founder of religion, sticking it in a hat supposedly and reading off Revelation like he's divining something. It's very strange. It has no precedent for any prophet in anywhere in the scriptures, and it's just weird. But I mean, the bigger problems for me with Mormonism, and then I'm going to move on to the next one just because again this is a little off topic.
For sure.
Is just that like when he tries his translation skills on an Egyptian papyrus that he buys I think he found it in Illinois, and he said it was the Book of Abraham, and
Right.
it was, yeah, and it's just an Egyptian funerary text, the Book of Breathings, and we know that, and he like doctors it and all this other stuff, and then he passes that off as revelation. I think that's kind of the smoking gun. And if you hear a lot of ex-Mormons talking about why did they lose their faith, it's because of that. And Michael Jones and David Falk have a really good stream about the Book of Abraham and rebuttals to that, that I would just highly recommend. David Falk is an Egyptologist, and he just debunks every theory possible, and I think it just fries Mormonism. And so that's where I would go. Also, another place where I would go with Mormons is just where's the evidence, right? And so I believe I'm a Christian because of one of the big reasons is because of the resurrection. Well, the resurrection weren't just brief, confusing episodes. They were at least reported to be something that took place over a long period of time and weren't brief and confusing episodes, but involved sight and touch and sound and all kinds of other things. They were multisensory. Whereas when you do get like the 3 witnesses that said they saw Moroni, like what are the details? What are the details of the testimony? How long did this thing transpire? This appearance, all that other kind of stuff. They don't really have a lot of details, and so it's like it's hard for me to latch on to any claim of any supposed appearance of a spirit or whatever, an angel, Jesus or whatever, if it's just like brief, short, kind of possibly even confusing episode that they were really primed for. Whereas for the apostles, they weren't even necessarily expecting it. They said that they thought the women were telling idle tales. And so I think that's kind of the bigger difference. And that's kind of the biggest difference with Christianity, period, is it's just based on evidence, whereas the claims of Mormonism or Islam or other faiths are just extremely shaky. So does that make sense?
I got a question about it's Paul writing to the Jews and the like the Greeks, and like somebody was telling me, like, I don't believe him, but like I just can't find the explanation of like why does Paul write 2 different rules? Like why does like one for the Jews and one for the
I just
Gentiles?
out of respect for the other people who are coming, I'm gonna let you go. Just because, again, it's not just to ask any question about Christianity kind of stream. Although one day I would be happy to probably do something like that. Maybe have some guests with me. But this is just kind of on the topics, like I said, that were in the thumb, and so I answered a couple, just kind of give you some ammo to talk to your friend.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, but I'm gonna have to move on to the next one, Logan. I appreciate it though.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Oop. Oh, sorry, Janata. I accidentally clicked you too soon. Dwayne was waiting a little bit longer. Dwayne, are you there? Dwayne, you're unmuted, but I can't hear you.
Yeah, I'm here. Do you hear me okay?
Yeah, good. How's it going, man?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
You can. All right, you can hear me, but now I can't hear you. This is not good.
Oh no. Yeah, man. I don't know. I can definitely hear you.
1 second.
Yeah, no problem. We'll give you a minute.
So I'm currently doing this through Bluetooth earbuds, and I think that's messing with the audio a little bit. All right, let's see. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can definitely hear you.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
But I cannot hear you anymore. I'm sorry. I'm gonna log back in and come back through. You can go to somebody else, but I'm gonna try to fix this audio issue so I can
no problem.
articulate
no
the
worries.
best argument. Sorry about that.
That's fine. Oop. All right. Janata, how's it going, man? You're a deist. I think you're muted.
Yeah. Hi, Eric.
Hey, how's it going? I'm good, man. I'm good. Thanks for coming up.
Yeah. Yes. Jonathan, I'm like the close friend of David.
Okay. Yeah. Jonathan, gotcha.
Great.
Like that.
Good. Good evening. It's close to midnight here in Brazil. And what I wrote in the chat, I would say that we can discuss that. For me, historical quests in the New Testament do not make sense, right? It doesn't make sense because the New Testament, it's a collection of texts that talks about supernatural characters, supernatural events, healings, angels, demons, and so on. And I can't understand, why it's the academy it's opening a big accession for the New Testament because nobody is really trying to apply historical criteria to the Odyssey or other Homeric books and other texts in Greek that talks about gods, demigods, demons, supernatural dimensions and all of those things. Is there really such a very strong evidence that would force the academy to deal with the New Testament differently from these all other Greek religious texts and Egyptian religious texts or whatever? I don't think that there is such a strong evidence. There is a strong political power behind this, but there is no this kind of evidence, you know. So the whole idea again that to trying to use historical criteria in such a very mythological content that is really is in the center. It's very deeply related with those texts. It doesn't sound serious for me, you know, from a historical point of view. You know?
So because it talks about miracles and different things like that, you think that the New Testament is just, it must be mythology, it must be fiction?
Well, I would say that it's something that, you know, the guys, they are trying to apply historical criteria, right, to trying to establish historical facts.
Sure. I mean, you know, obviously that a lot of them don't accept the supernatural claims in the New Testament. They're just trying to find what they find, whatever nuggets or kernels of history that they can get out of the text by applying those criteria. You know that, right?
But you know, we are dealing with a text that it's really it's saying a lot of non-usual things like demons, possessions, supernatural healings, and supernatural creatures, spirits, and you know, when you are reading the Odyssey, or when you are reading other Greek text, religious text, that it's being passing in a real city, in a supposed real landscape and so on, but you know, it's talking about mythological characters.
Okay. I got you.
And, you know, why the Testament is special in this sense, you know.
Sure.
I can see.
Is it just because of there's miracles in the story? Is that like the main reason, besides forget angels and demons and different things like that? So you think like miracles, they don't happen, and so why should we have been taking this text seriously when it's reporting people being healed of open blind eyes and, you know, all kinds of different things like that? Am I understanding you?
Why are we can't apply historical criteria to the Odyssey?
Okay, well,
what would be your objection for that?
Yeah, okay, all right, sure. Let me answer. There's a couple different ways that I could go with this. And so, first of all, the Odyssey doesn't purport to be a historical account. Okay, we know that it's fiction, whereas the Gospels, right at the beginning, at the outset, right, like Luke's prologue, in Luke chapter 1, verse 3, or 1 through 4, he's referring to the fact that he is getting his information from witnesses himself. And so I'll just read you the text real quick. It says, just as they were handed down to us who were first eyewitnesses and servants of the word. And then he says, with this in mind, I have myself have carefully investigated everything. From the beginning, I too decided to write to you an orderly account to you, most excellent Theophilus, who a lot of people would say that that's just like his patron or something like that, so that you may know the certainty of those things that you've been taught. And so right at the outset, the genre, at least, is purporting to, I'm not saying that it just is because he says it is, but it's purporting to be an eyewitness account, that he's gathering his information from eyewitnesses. And that is the genre that he's writing in. He's writing his history. He's writing historiography. So a more close genre would not be Homer's Odyssey or something like that. That's not the genre of the Gospels at all. Okay. Now, if you want to say, we could back up a little bit, and if you want to say, well, we know that miracles don't happen, therefore, whatever is being said in this is just a bunch of lies and like fictions, myths, different things like that. I mean, that complaint goes back to really the origin of modern historical criticism. So you have D.F. Strauss here. Let me share something with you real quick here. 1 second. Now I'm going somewhere with this, so just bear with me for a second. Okay, so this is D.F. Strauss. He's basically the founder of, your modern biblical criticism. Like, I'm not saying he's the guy who started it, but he's the guy who a lot of these people like Bart Ehrman and Dale Allison and others will kind of pay homage to, as the guy who really spearheaded this and got it going in the right direction. And he says that the contradiction between the supernatural accounts and the natural element, which alone is historically available, could not be reconciled so long as the Gospels, or even a single one of them, was taken to be as truly and fully historical. This indeed they cannot be, for the simple reason that they contain supernaturalism. And so D.F. Strauss is looking and trying to understand who the historical Jesus is, but he's saying that we're going to take all the supernaturalism out of this particular quest because there is no supernatural, and we know that. That's just begging the question. That's just starting at the offset that there is no supernaturalism, okay? And so a couple ways that I would rebut somebody who is skeptical of this whole idea is I want to fill in your background knowledge, your background information, because your world, and this was my experience too, Jonathan, is I was really similar. When I read the Gospels, I read Jesus as like, wow, he's this really wise sounding guy. I like what he's saying in the Sermon on the Mount. He has a lot of really interesting teachings, but then you get right out of the Sermon on the Mount, and the next thing you know, he's speaking things, and a centurion's servant is healed. He's opening the eyes of the blind. He's working these miracles and doing all these things. And I just thought, this really cannot be eyewitness testimony. This must be like theologizing or fiction or, mythology or something like that. But if I can demonstrate the existence of numerous religiously contextualized events that are well documented but lack an adequate natural explanation, I'm talking about miracles here, then we could reasonably deduce that Christianity provides the most, and if we can reasonably deduce that Christianity provides the most plausible explanation for these occurrences, it should prompt you as a skeptic to reconsider your philosophical bias against the text. Because right now, at least partially, you're biased against the Gospels is that they contain supernaturalism, therefore they cannot be history. Now I'm going to show you something. I'm going to give you some examples of some miracles that we know about that have happened in the modern world today. And I'm not just going to say like so-and-so in the bush of Africa said that his grandma had her, her back pain healed and in some evangelist meeting, in the 1960s or something like that, and just ask you to accept it. I'm going to give you some cases that are, I think, very well documented. I'm going to use a high criteria, one that is religiously neutral. Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit about, this is called the Lambertini criterion. This was developed by the Catholic Church. Any healing miracle that they accept as part of like, yes, this really happened, they scrutinize a lot, okay? And they use this particular criteria, okay? So I'll go over this real quickly, and then I'm going to give you a few case examples, and then maybe we could bounce to the New Testament, okay? So a diagnosis and the healing have to be medically documented. They have to be organic and not psychosomatic. It can't just be in your head. It has to be, like I said, medically documented. The illness that the person has to be progressive and show no improvement prior to the healing. The healing is permanent and not temporary. And the healing has to be instantaneous and not gradual. It has to be complete and not merely partial. And it has to be spontaneous and not attributable to treatment, okay? And so it has to be basically beyond the bounds of science to be able to explain, okay? It has to be. We're not looking at, weak claims here, okay? We're looking at things that have to fit this very strict criteria. This person really was sick. They really were getting worse. And their healing was complete, spontaneous, and permanent. It didn't go away after a week or two or even a few years. And that they, it just wasn't an illness in their head, right? And so now this is a person that I spoke to, and I have a whole video if you want to just go to my live tab and scroll down. This is a gentleman that I've talked to named Bruce Van Natta, who was a semi-truck mechanic, and he was working late one night, and he was underneath the truck, and the jack gave way, the thing that was holding up the truck, and it fell. The truck fell on him, right on his abdomen, and he felt blood spurting all the way up his chest and out of his mouth, and this truck was completely crushed him right on his abdomen. Okay, so he should have bled out within 10 minutes, and there was subsequent medical studies. He's the only person to survive such injuries, but that's not the miracle. I mean, that's part of it, but the crazy part is that his small intestine was so severely damaged that most of it had to be removed. It had to be amputated, right? His guts were basically destroyed. In other words, he only had 120 centimeters of intestine. You and I probably have about 600 centimeters. His ileum, which is the part that helps you really digest food, went from 350 centimeters to only 25. So within just a few weeks, all he could do was, he was living off of an IV. He couldn't eat any kind of food whatsoever. He dropped from 180 pounds to 125. So he was rapidly losing weight. He was expected to die. Now, the ileum is the most critical part of your small intestines for nutrient absorption. Bruce only had 7% of what's actually normal, right? So he's going to die. This is a first trauma operative note from November 16th of 2006. This is his doctor. This is his doctor's note. Okay. So he had a friend come visit him and prayed for his healing, and he commanded his small intestine to grow in the name of Jesus. Van Natta felt an electric jolt and was healed. His small intestine, they took x-rays, they looked. Now, you can't measure intestines, like cut somebody open and, get out the tape measure and find out, right? But they could tell by all x-rays and all accounts that his small intestine had doubled in length. It became fully functional. This was confirmed by multiple radiologists, some who are not believers, like are total skeptics, right? Van Natta remains healthy all these years, defying medical odds. And so he's still alive. He's been x-rayed multiple times. He still has the scars, but people talk about, well, why doesn't God heal amputees? Well, your small intestine regrowing is more difficult than even an arm regrowing. But here we have that, right? We have somebody who's, by all accounts, should be dead. This is completely medically inexplicable. Now, I'm going to give you just one more, and then I'll let you can give me some pushback. So this is something that somebody that Bruce actually met. This is Chris Gunderson. And Chris was interviewed by my friend Caleb Jackson and Than Christopoulos on his channel Exploring Reality. This is just a screenshot. Now, Chris, when he was just 2 weeks old, I have almost a 4-week-old, so I can't even comprehend this. This would be awful. But when he was just 2 weeks old, he experienced severe vomiting. And he basically was just projectile vomiting everything that his mother was giving him, right? He was diagnosed with a paralyzed stomach, which is called gastroparesis, and he needed feeding tubes in order to survive. Now, gastroparesis, again, it's a paralyzed stomach. That keeps you from your stomach emptying. And medical technology manages symptoms, but offers no cure. And by all accounts, Chris should only have survived till about the end of his teens, and that's usually when you're expected to die. Chris would talk about being at high school, getting weak, and just passing out. Okay. Surgeons added basically a medical limb at 11 months to reroute his stomach emptying, and they relied on a judastomy tube, basically a feeding tube, for 16 years. And he struggled with adequate nutrition. Chris talks about, like, if he wanted to eat food, he could only bite like a hamburger, and then he'd have to like spit it out. And so, anyways, Van Natta was talking about the miracle that he experienced, right? At Chris's church in Oregon. Now, Van Natta was from Wisconsin, which is the northern part of the United States. Oregon is on the West Coast, okay? But Van Natta, because of this healing, was sharing his testimony because he knew the pastor. He invited him, and he was sharing his story. And at the end, he invited people to come up and receive prayer. Well, Chris did not want to go. He was a teenager. His mom dragged him there. He was very reticent, right? But he went up anyways at his mom's request. And Van Natta prayed for him, and he said that he experienced pulsing and contraction sensations in his abdomen. He even said that it really hurt. But that night, he went home and he just ate normal food, and he had zero complications. Primary care physician and gastroenterologist couldn't explain the resolution. The tubes were removed 4 months after healing, and it's documented in a medical case study. And so this is, I'm not going to read this to you, but these are just me copying and pasting from his own doctor's report. What happened? This is back in April 2012. He was a teenager then. Now he's a nurse. Okay. He works at a hospital because he wanted to give, his life to what kept him alive for so long. But basically, by all medical accounts, he should not exist, right? These are medically impossible. I'm giving you 2. I have 7 in these slides, and there are dozens and dozens that are documented in multiple books that I can talk to you about and recommend. I have a friend who's writing a 2-volume book on this. And so what this does, and I'll finish with this, is this informs our background knowledge that, wait a minute, like, why are we treating the New Testament as if it's just a fairy tale when it's reporting things about real geography, real people that we know existed, things that are not even easy to get right, things that are difficult to get right about place names, customs, titles of local officials, all of these difficult things that would be difficult to know, especially without the aid of like Wikipedia or ChatGPT or Google and different things like that. And yet they're getting these things right, and they seem to be willing to suffer for these beliefs. And we know in our background knowledge, at least, that miracles actually are still reported, and there are many of them that are medically inexplicable, and they always happen in a Christian context. We don't have anything that meets the criteria that I gave you in any other religious context that I'm aware of. If somebody can bring me, that's my challenge, one that actually fits this criteria in, say, a Buddhist context or a Hindu context or a Muslim context, they're welcome to do so, but nobody has met that challenge or even tried yet. And so, yeah, anyways, what do you think about that? I think you're muted, Jonathan.
Oh, great. Great exposition there. Yeah. Well, I'm really quite open to supernatural phenomena, right? Okay. I'm not, what I can say, 100% naturalist in some sense.
Sure. Well, if you're a deist, do you believe that God exists? He just doesn't reveal himself through miracles or prophecy.
Oh yeah, I do believe in a creator of the universe, right. Yeah. Force. But if this force reveal is some worshipped revealed God, I'm really have some problems with that idea and with the Christian version of that idea, because we are talking about evidence of Christian in Christian contexts of supernatural events, and I would say, and I would quote. I can't quote one book, but I know that there are some other research on about it, that trying to document supernatural events in a non-Christian context, and one of those works is a work from a Brazilian scientists that they follow the they call in the United States spiritism, from Allan Kardec too. Sure. They call that spiritism, and they publish a book by the Springer, and I'm trying to find this book now.
Yeah, Springer's like an academic kind of thing usually.
Yeah, it's a respected, peer-reviewed, published, But anyway, I'm not a spirit. I'm not a Allan Kardec follower, But I would say that it's an example of a attempt to document in a non-Christian context, supernatural things. But you really quote a lot of interesting cases that there was a very non-usual event, like a supernatural growth of an intestine and so on. But I would say how we would interpret that different. You can interpret that as in a more traditional way, saying that there is an evidence for God, for God, Christian version of God. But I'm skeptic about the nature of the force that maybe would be behind that. But why? Because when you're talking, for example, about the problem of evil and the nature of God, why those persons would have to suffer that, would have to have this novel, and then for a supernatural power to rescue them. So what these kinds of events can say, what they can say for us about the nature of such a power that heal them. You can say, well, they heal them, and I wouldn't deny, well, this power healed them, but is this power really all powerful, or is this power good? I would say that exactly from this event, I would say that this is an argument against that this force would be good, or that this force would be all powerful, for example.
And so go ahead.
I was trying to talk about, to go back to the New Testament now. So
you're good.
When you're reading about a text that talks about the narrative of a Messiah candidate that have it's supernatural from the beginning to the end. It's a supernatural guy from a supernatural. He born in a supernatural way, and he is fulfilling prophecies. It's all, it's a very fantastic from the beginning to the end. And his name is Jesus, that it basically means Savior. So there's a lot of suspicious to me. That's strange. That's really at least curious. Why the name of this Messiah candidate that is the guy? He's a demigod. He's the avatar. His name means Savior, right? Curiously, is that a symbol? Is that an analogy? And actually, I'm persuaded that we can't find solar mythology in New Testament.
Ooh,
but so you can comment.
Yeah. Well, let me answer that twofold here, and then I'll note your pushback, and then I have a few more people waiting. So, just trying to be as fair to everyone as possible. So regarding God being unjust because he works miracles, I mean, I would say if he performs any miracles, there would be less pain and suffering in the world, not more. And really, that just goes back to the problem of evil, right? And Christianity has a wide range of philosophical and biblical answers set in response to the problem of pain and suffering and the problem of unanswered prayer. And so there are many theodicies and explanations and different things like that. But the thing is that atheism, or even deism or something like that, where God performs no miracles, he just creates the world and then just kind of like lets it run on natural principles, would provide way less resources to explain cases where God does seem to perform for miraculous healing. So really, there's a bit of an epistemic asymmetry here. The instances in which God appears to heal somebody in response to prayer offer far more compelling evidence for Christian theism, especially the two examples that I gave, where people prayed for it in specifically the name of Jesus, than any counterexamples for their disconfirmation, counterexamples of suffering, for example. And then also I would just say that just because one experiences miracles doesn't necessarily guarantee that one's life becomes more comfortable. I mean, you have people like the Apostle Paul, or all of the apostles who experienced miracles. Peter's mother-in-law, for example, was healed of like a terrible fever, at least according to the Gospels. And yet Peter was martyred, very likely. And so like, it doesn't necessarily guarantee just like an easier life. And so another thing that I could say in response is that if God were always to instantly answer our prayers, like just the very moment that we answer, he just answers, boom, it's done. regardless of our spiritual condition or circumstances, we would really lose out on a lot of the benefits that come with building our character, right? So faith, one perseveres when they have faith, and they learn to trust God even in spite of circumstances. That's something that I would argue builds good character, right? Hope is something that builds good character in people. Patience, steadfastness, right? Or even humility, relying on God, or empathy. Even like I've gone through difficult experiences in my life with like just a number of different things that give me empathy for that other person, and so on and so forth. And so, on the other hand, if we did live in a world where God just never had answered our prayers in any kind of extraordinary way whatsoever, I think it would harm our relationship with Him and make us less dependent on Him. And so we wouldn't have any past experiences to reflect and see noticeable goodness. And so I think we actually are in a situation in this world where we appear to have the best of both worlds. God allows for at least sufficient suffering for us to develop our character in using our faith, in growing in our confidence and trust in Him, for growing in hope, for growing in patience, for growing in empathy and different things like that, while He also extends help through His mercy, so that we can learn to better cooperate with Him. And then most notably, the Christian God, if Christian theism is true, well, Jesus enters into the creation Himself and suffers the most excruciating death possible, and doesn't use a miracle to just like release Himself from it. He goes through the entire thing and defeats death and is resurrected. And so I don't think that miracles necessarily would make God unjust. Now, as far as what you said about Christianity being based on solar myths and different things like that, no, again, like and just my whole channel is dedicated to this. There is just so much evidence that this is historical, like writing, it's reportage. I'm not going to say exactly biography necessarily, but a lot of scholars do think that the Gospels fit into like some kind of biography, and they claim to be historical, but then they also are filled with tons of historical facts. So let me just give you a few examples, and I know I'm having to be a little bit long-winded because just a good answer requires sometimes some words. And so I'm pulling up some slides again, so just bear with me. I'm just the slide guy, all right? So just deal with it, people, all right? It's loading really slow because my internet appears to decided to go back to like 1997, I guess. So one second here. So the book of Acts claims to be a history of the church, right? And so let me share my screen again here. Press the wrong button. No, press it again. Turning into a boomer here. Redeemed boomer. All right, here we go. All right, so this is just the book of Acts. Ignore all this. Let me skip ahead a little bit here. So let me just give you examples of how historical of a book Acts is. I could give you some from the Gospels, but it's the same genre, right? When Luke talks about in his prologue in the book of Acts, he's doing the same kind of stuff. He's like, hey, this is a follow-up from my last historical account, and now I'm giving you another one. And so here we go. All right. Okay, so we know that the Gospels intersect with some history in the sense that like Josephus or Tacitus tell us about the crucifixion. And that there was like Christians who believed that Jesus was the Messiah. Now, it could be, although some argued otherwise, that they're just picking this information up from what Christians believed in the first century, right? These are Roman and Jewish historians who get some stuff right, but they only give us the broadest outlines, right? But we actually have something better than that, and I like to call these external confirmations. What they are is they're places where the Gospels and Acts mention in passing facts about the historical setting. So the more casual mention, the better, and the more obscure the facts, they get better. And here's the thing, Luke and really all the evangelists get hard facts right. Now remember, these weren't the days of Google, ChatGPT, or Wikipedia. They couldn't just look this stuff up, right? And so these weren't even the days of modern libraries where you could just go use a card catalog, use the whole Dewey Decimal System, pull out a book on its shelf that's bound, has chapter titles and all these other things and just quickly look something up in order to create a narrative. And so Luke gets a bunch of difficult facts right that this sure looks like history. It definitely does not look like myth making. So, for example, you have Luke telling us about a guy by the name of Sergius Paulus, who is called the proconsul of Cyprus, right? Now, Cyprus was a senatorial province in 22 BC, and it was ruled by proconsuls, not legates. This is according to the Roman historian Cassius Dio in his Roman history, right? You could look all this stuff up. Don't just take my word for it. Check me out. Look this stuff up. And then later under the Flavian Empire, so this is post 70 AD, when they came into rule, Cyprus became imperial again and was governed by legates. Now, if Acts was written late and was just making stuff up, as many scholars claim, Luke probably should have called him a legate, but instead he actually gets the title correct. It's exactly in the right time for Paul's visit in 47 to 48 AD when Paul visits this very place, right? Now, this is a kind of minor local administrative detail that's easy to get wrong. But like I said, Luke gets it right. Now, we have actually archaeology, which you're not going to find archaeology really backing up Homer's Odyssey, okay, or sun myths, all right? But we have a Soloi inscription, the Soloi inscription, which was a inscription found in Soloi, which talks about the proconsulship of Paulus, right? That it dates back to the 1st century, probably around 50 AD, if under the Emperor Claudius. So even if it's not the same guy, it does confirm that who Luke is talking about, the Paulus family, were actually indeed present in Cyprus. Now get this. There is another inscription in Pisidian Antioch, that names Lucius Sergius Paulus the Younger, the son of Lucius. Now, this is a Roman official with ties to the Paulus family, probably of the same lineage. Now, in Acts chapter 13 through 14, we read that after Cyprus, Paul and Barnabas was his traveling companion, and the Apostle Paul I'm talking about here, where do they go? They go directly to Pisidian Antioch. Now, if you look at a map, that's not the nearest or most obvious stop. So could this be, it's very possible, and I think very plausible, that this was at Sergius Paulus' suggestion. And so the whole story takes place where Paul commands an opponent of his. There's a man by the name of Elymas, the sorcerer, who, as Paul is trying to witness to this guy and share the gospel with him, he's trying to turn him away from the faith. He's trying to say, these guys are liars, they're crooks, they're full of crap, don't believe them, right? And so Paul says basically like, hey, for a time, you're going to be blind, just as Paul ended up being for a time blind by Jesus. And so this is not an easy thing to be mistaken about. And according to the story in Acts chapter 13, this is precisely what led to Sergius Paulus's conversion. And then I'll just give you a couple more examples real quick here. If you go right next door to the 14th chapter, we read about Paul healing a crippled man. Acts 14:11 notes that the crowd shouted in Lycaonian, which is a very obscure language, right? You would expect, being in the Roman Empire at this particular place, in this particular region, that they would have been speaking Greek. It was unusual in a cosmopolitan Roman colony. Well, there's a classical historian by the name of Colin Hember who wrote a book called The Book of Acts in the Setting of Hellenistic History. And the information, this is where I'm getting a lot of my information. He details 84 facts that are confirmed through either secular history or archaeology or different things like that, would be very difficult for somebody to get right just by guesswork or doing a bunch of detective work. But anyways, he notes that Lystra, though it was a Roman province, was in a rural part of Anatolia where the locals there preserved their native tongue. This is according to a lot of inscriptions we have. This is a very rare specific cultural detail that Luke gets right. And not only that, but on top of that, in the very same chapter, when Paul does heal the cripple, the locals kind of pulled Ewoks worshiping C-3PO and in Star Wars kind of thing. They start worshiping him as a god, right? Or they try to. And they call Barnabas Zeus and they call Hermes Paul, right? They think Paul is Hermes, right? The gods have come down to us. They've given us this power to men, right? And it says that we do have inscriptions, several inscriptions, that confirm that Zeus and Hermes were, in fact, the local gods, the patron gods that were worshipped in this specific area. And then we have Ovid's Metamorphoses, which is I'm sure you've probably heard of Ovid. He tells of Zeus and Hermes visiting Phrygia, which is actually right next door to Laconia, mirroring local legend. And identifying the speaker as the lesser god actually matches the ancient belief about divine visits. And so the reason why they thought Paul was Hermes and not the big and important Zeus is because Paul was the one doing all the speaking. He was the herald of the more important god. And so that's just like a couple examples. Let me give you just one more here. Let's see. Here is, let's see. I brought this one up earlier in the stream, but you might have missed it. But I was talking to somebody who was asking a super chat. There's a story in Acts chapter 23 where Paul is appearing before the Jewish council, right? He's on trial. He brought a Gentile in the temple, or at least supposedly he did. And the Jews are ticked off, right? They get him arrested, and he appears before the Jewish council, and he's struck at the mouth on the mouth at Ananias's command. Okay, Ananias, according to Acts, was the high priest at the time. Okay, Paul ends up yelling at the guy, and he's like, "God is going to strike you, you whitewashed wall." Like, he insults the guy, and he's rebuked by the people around the high priest, his whole entourage, and they say, "Would you revile God's high priest?" And then Paul, kind of apparently sheepishly looking, answers, "I didn't know he was the high priest." So this raises a question, right? Why doesn't Paul, who's a student of Gamaliel, according to Paul, or at least according to Acts, a guy who is in the Sanhedrin, how does he not know who the high priest is? Like, what is going on, right? And this has led some people to think, well, like, the writer of Acts is ignorant or something. But as it turns out, the Jewish historian Josephus tells us that Ananias, this same high priest that Luke is describing here, was appointed and sent to Rome to answer for some shenanigans to the governor Quadratus. He was brought up on charges because basically he had a bunch of goons running around, basically collecting ties like mafia mob boss enforcers, right? And the Jews complained, so he ended up being sent to this governor Quadratus to answer for his shenanigans, right? And though he was able to kind of wiggle his way out of it, there was enough smoke around the guy that Quadratus did not restore him to the office of high priest. What's weird in this particular time is because Rome was controlling this area. They were saying you can be high priest, you can't be high priest. And they were basically changing out high priests all the time. Okay. And so he was acquitted, but he wasn't restored to this office. Jonathan replaced him as the high priest. Another guy by the name of Jonathan, similar to your name there, replaced him as high priest during Felix's term. Well, it turns out Josephus tells us that he actually was murdered in the temple, and that left the office completely vacant. There was actually no high priest until Ismail, the son of Phabi, who was appointed by Agrippa. Well, if you think about Felix, Paul, he talks to Felix in Acts 24, and then he talks to Agrippa in Acts chapter 26. There's a period of time there. So Acts 23 occurs during that vacancy. Ananias was acting as if he still held the office. He was still playing high priest, even though he had been defrocked and demoted by the Romans, right? And so when he's standing before him and he says, "Well, I didn't know he was the high priest," it's because he's not. And Paul is being insulting. He's being sarcastic. And so all of this fits with the history that we know of this time. So that is not at all, none of these things. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. I give a 2.5 hour thing on just some of the evidence that Acts is historical. I have all kinds of other videos on my channel about why the Gospels are historical. These are just a few things. It's a huge mountain of evidence. And I'm just kind of giving you an example. This is not fiction. Okay. Does that make sense?
Well, Eric, I do agree that Luke was a very smart guy and a careful writer, but was really him writing history, or he was making history? Because we know that he got around Jesus' genealogy, for example. We you know. do you believe that Acts chapter 2 was a historical event? Because was this such a dramatic event? Josephus would heard about. Why Josephus doesn't mention it?
Well, that would be
Josephus mentioned such a great event like Pentecost Day and all of these stuff. Why Joseph has never heard about these and never wrote about that? Is that historical? This guy is being historically careful, but is that really good evidence that he's still talking about angels, demons, gods, and all of these things, and that shows that we must really accept this text has historical evidence with historical criteria. Is that really such a radically different of Troya? Like Troya book would say, look, Troy was a real city and this that and that therefore we can use historical criteria to say, yeah, Troy was a historical account. Well, because come on, and I would say that look, he was trying to take carefully in using good source. He used the other gospels, like it's not so strange like Matthew that he was an eyewitness, right, according with the tradition, and Luke used the other gospel. It's not so bizarre like Matthew that was an eyewitness use non-eyewitnesses testimony, right? That you would agree with me that is bizarre that Matthew was an eyewitness using non-eyewitness content to make his book. It's something strange, and I don't know if you heard that, but there are peer-reviewed literature that there are persons that really trying to argue that there is a connection and a kind of dependency of Luke and Josephus.
I already earlier in the stream I actually answered that very question. So just looking at my last example, right? So if Luke used Josephus, right, there's a big problem because the example that I just laid out in Acts chapter 23, he would have to have been like super, super subtle, super, super crafty. He's picking all this stuff up. He's doing all this detective work. And then he has Paul just kind of make this cheeky, sarcastic comment that isn't necessarily even clear to every reader. It's like really knowing the historical background. That's what makes it like kind of clear that Paul is insulting the guy. And he's like, you're not really a high priest. And yet these same people want to say, okay, but like where there's a census, or like you just brought up, where there's a genealogy or something like that, there is some kind of a historical error, historical contradiction or something like that. Well, that's not even a remotely consistent picture of the author, right? And so if you're using and you're dependent upon particular sources, you're going to try to actually maybe match up those particular historical sources. And yet at the same time, they're going to talk about, well, he misplaces a guy by the name of Theudas, and that's wrong. Like he puts him in a different time that he doesn't exist. And then he gets the census wrong. And there's this big 10-year discrepancy between Matthew and Luke and all this other stuff. And he's got Quirinius as the governor, and that's all this other stuff, right? So now I don't think that these are difficult things to talk about, harmonize, and explain. I've done many videos on this particular topic. But like if you're copying a source, you would at least try to like stick to it a little bit better than that, right? Now, if you said that Matthew is using Mark, if you have a perfectly good source who is based upon the testimony of Peter, according to every church father that we possibly have, he doesn't even join the 12 until later, right? And then he has information to use, but Matthew does add his own information when he has it. So let me give you an example real quick, okay? And then I do have to go to the next one, although this is really good and I appreciate the conversation. And so let me share something with you real quick, okay? So King Herod, it says Herod heard about this. For Jesus' name to become well known. Some were saying John the Baptist. Some were saying. Remember that John the Baptist has been raised from the dead. And that is why miraculous powers are at work in him. Others said he's Elijah. Still others claimed he's a prophet, like one of the prophets long ago. But when Herod heard of this, he said, John, who I beheaded, has been raised from the dead. And it talks about how he, got Herod killed. Okay. So that's Mark's account. Now, Matthew, still looking like he's looking at the same account and kind of quoting it a little bit, there's a variation, right? And so what a skeptic, a biblical critic is going to want to say is that pretty much any time that Matthew deviates from Mark, that's redaction criticism. And he's just adding his own flavor. He's adding his own little special sauce. He's being creative, okay? So check this out. So this is Matthew 14, parallel passage, same story. At that time, Herod the Tetrarch heard the reports about Jesus, and he said to his attendants, aka his servants, right? This is the NIV. Let me pull up the ESV. His attendants, his servants, whatever. This is John the Baptist. He has been raised from the dead. That's why these miraculous powers are working him. And so in one place, it's just he asked this question, but he doesn't say to who he asked the question to. Matthew specifies it's his servants. Well, that's interesting and all, but how would Matthew even know what Herod is saying in private to a group of his own servants asking about who Jesus is, right? Well, we very plausibly this is in Luke, we get a list of Jesus's female followers. Now, in this particular passage, it's not talking about the death of John the Baptist at all. Zero. It's only listing that Jesus has female followers who helped finance him and the 12's itinerant ministry. All right. And he says that one of those followers was Joanna, the wife of Chuza, Herod's household manager. Okay, so now we understand. Oh, my camera just went out on me. I guess you guys can hear me. Hopefully this fixes soon here. But anyway, so that would make sense. Where did Matthew get his information? Well, Jesus actually had a group of female followers, including Joanna, who was married to somebody who was in Herod's household, who was actually high ranked, his household manager. That's where he would have got the inside information. Okay. And so I think that this is points more towards this being eyewitness testimony. And whoa, he's using Mark though. He's using Mark. Yeah, but when he knows something different, he adds it. We don't need to have this black and white idea of dependence. He could be dependent, but when he has his own information, he can go ahead and add that information. Hopefully I can get this camera thing working again. Anyways, I hope that makes sense. Jonathan, I'd love to talk to you more. I probably need to get to at least one other person in here. So I apologize that I'm going to cut this off. But I hope this gave you some stuff to think about. And what I would really recommend doing is, if Christianity is possibly true, if it's even remotely possible that this could be true, then I think this is really worth investigating your time in. And so what I would do is not necessarily spend a bunch of time on YouTube and listening to like who says this and who says that, but it sounds like you're familiar with at least some of the negative case against Christianity. I would say like definitely take some time, read like that book that I talked about, Colin Hemmer, The Book of Acts in the Setting of Hellenistic History, right? Invest in something like that. There are other books and different things like that that you can get. Just Peter Williams, really easy book, Can We Trust the Gospels, right? At least give it like the same energy and opportunity that you've given against it. And then at worst, you could become like an extremely well-informed critic. So anyways, I hope this was helpful. I would let you push back a little bit more, but I just at least wanted to answer that. And then, but I do probably need to get to the next one. So is that cool?
It's cool. It was a great talk. Thank you so much for the time, the attention.
Yeah, man. Hope I gave you something to think about. All right. Let's see if I can fix this camera thing. Apparently Elgato is no bueno. Let's see. This is going to be a big problem. At least I could put up a low. Oh, yeah. Now I'm washed out. That's good. That's good. There we go. All right. So kick. All right, Dwayne, I think has been waiting for a while. Let's see what he's got. Going to the private chat. Just trying to see what Dwayne was about. Dwayne. Okay, yep, Dwayne. All right, Dwayne. Hopefully you got your mic and.
All right, hello. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you this time.
All right, I can hear you. All right. Sorry about that. Fixed the problem. I think we don't have any more audio problems. Okay, all right. So I am a unconvinced agnostic. I have no problem with the Christianity faith. I have no problem with people that believe in the resurrection. I have no problem with people believing that Jesus is God. It's funny actually because my question is did the resurrection happen? Did Jesus fulfill prophecy, and do Christian miracles happen? And also, did Jesus claim to be God? Now, I think you can believe that Jesus claimed to be God. I think you can believe that Paul met Jesus and still have problems with the resurrection and with Jesus fulfilling prophecy. I, for one, I don't believe in the resurrection. I think he did fulfill prophecy, but if we go into the prophecy, it's very general. You know, he's going to be a Jew, he's going to be born in Galilee, he's going to be riding a donkey at some point in his life, he's going to come out of Egypt, and then he's going to die, and then he's going to resurrect from the dead. Now, they're very general. They are very general with that prophecy. They need the more miraculous prophecy to be true. Which, could it be such an insane thought to believe that they added this on to Jesus? I don't think that's such an insane thing to think. Now, obviously, you don't believe that, but do you think that's such an insane thing to think?
Well, insane is a pretty harsh term. So, like, the insane things to think are like, you know, that Charlie Kirk was really murdered by the Jews. Oh, no, I'm just kidding. That's terrible.
But you understand what I'm saying, though. Like, do you have a problem with people that go, you know, that's pretty out there. I got a problem with that.
Do I think all like skepticism is unreasonable? No, I don't. I wouldn't necessarily say that.
Okay, all right. I appreciate that.
Well, I was skeptical at one time, and I think I was necessarily being unreasonable at the time with some of it, at least. And so, is it like the prophecies in particular that you don't find compelling, or you said that you also doubt the resurrection? And so, like, what direction do you want to go?
Well, the resurrection is, well, the main evidence for that is the 12 apostles. They all believed it. They all died for it. Well, the 9/11 hijackers believed that they were going to get 72 virgins and go to heaven. So does that mean that Islam is true? No, of course not. Nobody believes that. No, nobody thinks like that. So to say that they died for it, it doesn't really help at all. It's not really. I wouldn't say that's evidence. Now,
sure.
To say.
Go ahead. Oh, I hope your audio didn't cut out again. Okay, are you there? I hope it's not me. Oh, I'm still going.
Oh no, did it cut out?
Cut out a little bit there. Can you?
How much of there do you not?
I'm getting like a bad echo.
Of myself. Oh, sorry about that. All right, sorry about that. So, like, what did you not hear?
I heard everything.
Okay.
I'm still hearing my echo though.
You know, I'm gonna let you talk and mute myself.
Okay. So to the point of like 9/11 hijackers, did they believe that they're have a sincere belief? Sure. But number one, and I think you probably know this and have heard this before, that the 9/11 hijackers weren't claiming to be witnesses of any sort of miraculous anything. They believed a really insane version of Islam. sincerely enough to follow through with their actions. Okay. That is a whole lot different than people saying, yeah, we saw him, we touched him, we handled it with our hands. And what we are reporting to you is what we've seen and heard. There's a little bit of a difference there in terms of proximity of the event and them actually being witnesses. Now, anytime that somebody is making a claim, there are explanations, right? They're either lying, and you're saying you don't think they were lying because they were obviously sincere, because at the very least they were willing to suffer. Now, I wouldn't make the argument as strong as some and say, well, they all went to their graves, confessing that Jesus is Lord and all that other stuff. I think that's too strong of a claim. I don't think that the historical evidence is big enough to support that. But I do think that we can very strongly say that they were willing to endure labors, dangers, hardships, and sufferings. And even in some cases, like the Apostle Paul, like the Apostle Peter, like the Jesus's brother James, and James, the son of Zebedee, all did undergo martyrdom for their particular faith. And I think that there's the evidence is pretty strong for that, or at least compelling enough to against competing hypothesis that they didn't really. Okay. And so now, could they have been honestly mistaken? Well, if the Gospels are historically reliable, and that's what I would say 80% of my channel is about, that argues for that, and that's what I was just talking with the other gentleman about. I was using the book of Acts. I could make an argument just using the book of Acts and Paul's letters if I had to, although I, of course, bring the Gospels into this. What the eyewitnesses claimed to have seen was not something that they could be reasonably mistaken about, right? So if you remember in the gospel accounts, Jesus invites them to touch his wounds. He's physical, right? He appears to them in the day. He appears to them from far away. He's up close. He's speaking. There's group appearances, right? These are multi-sensory appearances. And so I think it's very difficult for them to be mistaken about that. And what I'm saying, I'm not just saying the Gospels said it and the Gospels have these historical nuggets. Therefore, that's it, game over. I'm saying that what we have in the Gospels actually accurately reflects the original claims of the eyewitnesses. And there's a multitude of evidences that converge upon that. And so if what they claim actually goes back to the witnesses, then it's unlikely that they were mistaken based on the claims that they make. But because of the context in which they made those claims, that it was a hostile environment where Jesus had just been crucified, they're preaching that Jesus was risen from the dead and that the Jewish leaders are responsible 40 days at Pentecost. And so that's not something that anybody's going to say if they're probably lying. And so, yeah, it's kind of like a trilemma, only it's with the disciples. And it's like, they're not crazy and they're not just mistaken, honestly. And they, the content of their claims makes it impossible for them. Well, very unlikely for them to be mistaken. And the context of their claims makes it unlikely that they were lying. And so the question just goes back to, like, what are the Gospels? Are they historically reliable accounts of the life of Jesus? And do they accurately reflect what the apostles said that he did and taught?
Well, yes, that is the question then. But the problem with that is you talk about the martyrdom of the apostles. Well, we have very conflicting accounts of how they died. Some, of course, we have strong evidence to believe that Peter was, on upside down on the cross. But for some of the apostles, we don't really know, so we can't really say, well, the martyrdom is good evidence because we know that they really died, but we really don't know that they died for their faith.
Right. And so I'm not making that strong of a claim. I'm saying that they were willing to endure hardship, labors, dangers, and sufferings for their particular claims. And so, for instance, I just was talking to the previous gentleman about the reliability of the book of Acts. Okay, well, Acts chapter 2, they're making this claim to the Jews that Jesus rose from the dead. Chapter 3, they're basically blaming the Sanhedrin about to their face that they're responsible for this, but they're witnesses to the resurrection. Acts chapter 4, they're called on the carpet, Peter, James, and John, and they forbid them to preach in the name of Jesus, and they say, no, we're still going to do it. Acts chapter 5, they are arrested, and then they are beaten. Acts chapter 8 records well, 7, I should say, the martyrdom of Stephen. Now, Stephen isn't necessarily, we don't know if he was an eyewitness to the resurrection of Jesus or not, but that's like a warning shot. Okay. So imagine if you are in a neighborhood where there's another faith and somebody gets killed for believing in that particular faith, and you believe that faith, you're going to take that as like, uh-oh, this is trouble. If one of us is getting killed, when's the next one of us up for this? Okay. Acts chapter 12, we have James, the son of Zebedee, who is executed. And we read there that Herod's like, oh, you guys like that? You guys thought that was cool? I'll arrest Peter. Okay. So Peter isn't arrested. Okay. Then we have Paul all throughout Acts chapter 13 through 28, talking about all the sufferings. He's getting chased from town to town. We have plenty of evidence that from his own letters that he was willing to suffer. And then Paul talks about that all the apostles are treated like the scum of the earth. Let me look up the verse real quick. So he's.
I don't think I'm really understanding the point. Are you saying that because they were discriminated against for their faith, that is evidence for them being confident in their faith?
Yeah, I'm saying that's evidence for that they're sincere. If you believe something truly and sincerely, you
can believe anything sincerely. Doesn't mean it's true.
Right, but we're just going back to the fact that, there you go, thanks. But we're going back to the fact that the claims that they're making are things that you're not going to be mistaken about. So the content of their claim means that it's unlikely that they're mistaken. What's the content? That we saw him, that he spent 40 days with us, that we ate with him, that we drank in his presence, that he invited us to touch his wounds, that we saw him in groups, different things like that. These are not things that one could be easily mistaken about. Okay. And then the context again means that it's unlikely that they're lying. You're willing to grant that it's not that they're lying. I'm saying that the kind of experiences that they had are multi-sensory. They're not the kind of things that you'd be easily mistaken about. If your friend had his head cut off and everybody in your family and friends knows it, and then you see said friend for a period of 40 days, eat with him, and he's like, yeah, look at the scar. You can even touch it if you want to, but no, guys, I'm really alive. I'm just using this as a very crude example. Okay. Don't get too carried away with the example, but you'd be like, well, this is weird. This is confusing, but this is beyond, I'm just hallucinating something here, or I'm just projecting something here, or the resurrection is not a brief encounter that one can honestly be easily mistaken about. This is something that these appearances happened over a long period of time and were physical in nature. And so one cannot easily be mistaken about something like that.
Okay, that is a point. That is a very good point. But to say, like, other than the 12, let's go into like the other witnesses, because Paul points to the witnesses that were there of the resurrected Christ. It was 500.
That's what he says.
Yes, sure. 500 witnesses. Now, okay, this is the Christian point of view. Okay, Jesus, he was born. He began his ministry. He did miracles. He claimed to be the king of the Jews, and then he was killed for claiming to be the king, and then he is resurrected. Now, the historical view is that Jesus was a man. Jesus did begin the ministry. He did commit sedition. He did try to commit some form of a rebellion by claiming to be the king, and then he was crucified. And then after he died, a lot of people worshipped him and claimed that he was resurrected. Now, which one sounds more credible?
You're just human me right now, though, bro. You're just pulling the extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. The more credible, you don't want to just rule out miracles a priori. You go, okay. Sorry, that's okay. You have to look again at the details of the testimony, right? And so, yes, I think that
the only testimony we have is of the people that said that they were close to Jesus.
Why is that a problem?
Because they were close to Jesus. Why wouldn't they endorse it?
Well, we're going back and forth now, Dwayne. Now you're going to say that they possibly were lying. That's what you're insinuating. But before you said they were willing. Keep me on mute there for a second. Before you said that they were willing to suffer for their beliefs, you at least seem to be willing to admit, we don't know everything about their martyrdom or different things like that. But it does seem like they were probably sincere in their beliefs. And even if you're going to get all historical critical on me, they're going to say that, yeah, Peter was definitely sincere. Paul was definitely sincere. The 12 were probably very definitely sincere. And so, like, anybody's going to grant that. And so, well, now you're saying, no, they were motivated. Motivated for what?
No, I'm not saying that. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that their testimony shouldn't be held to such a high degree because they were close to Jesus. So why wouldn't they endorse it? I'm not saying that they're lying. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that to use their testimony to such a high degree would be then bias, wouldn't it?
We don't throw out biased testimony. So when a Jew survives the Holocaust and they write memoirs about it, like Anne Frank, they're biased for what they experienced. But we don't just throw it out because they're biased. Biased testimony just means they believe something strongly. Like we don't throw out bias. That's we don't get anywhere with that. We need the content of the claim and the context of the claim. And we need to know. We need to roll out. Hold on one second.
So you're testing. You're saying
sound much harsher on that.
Okay. I'm sorry, but basically you're saying that the testimony, whether it's bias or not, is valued.
Of course. If a woman claims, you're muted again. If a woman claims that like she was raped or something, like sure, she could be lying because she has it in for somebody and she wants to ruin somebody's life. Okay, so she could be lying. Or if she, I hope YouTube doesn't flag me for this. Or it's not a claim that she could probably easily be honestly mistaken about. And so if she can, we want to know her testimony, because with any testimony, there are two possible explanations. Somebody's honestly mistaken or somebody's lying. And just because somebody is biased, that woman who is a victim, she might be biased and want justice and want that guy, that scumbag, to be thrown in jail. She's going to be very biased against that guy, as she ought to be. Well, if the disciples are biased for something that they believe is true, so what? Like, we're all biased for what we believe is true. We just want to get to the point of like, is it true? Or were you guys hallucinating something? Did you have some kind of cognitive dissonance? Did you, see something brief and misinterpret it? But the Gospels, again, if they go back to eyewitness testimony, and that's what I was just talking about the other guy with, and spent 15 minutes talking about at least the book of Acts, and I could talk about how that's connected to the resurrection, but it's the same author that wrote the Gospel of Luke, and he's interviewing witnesses. He's getting his information from witnesses. He's present with Paul in Jerusalem when he's in prison and in Caesarea Maritima, which is 75 miles from Jerusalem. It says that all the elders were present. That's referring to apostles, including James, Jesus' brother. He's in a place where he can extract information from people and get stuff to write down of what did you guys see? What was it like? Just like he's in a place to get a bunch of information from Paul as being his traveling companion. Does that make sense?
Yes, that does make sense. And I think I'm glad you brought up Luke, because Luke is a pretty good sword to the side for that argument. But to move on to a different point, because I know we have to get to other people here, but so we've talked about the resurrection, and we've talked about Paul and all that, but I want to get to, did Jesus fulfill prophecy? Just real quick. Which is what I start off with. So again, he's supposed to be a Jew. He's supposed to be born in Galilee. He's supposed to go to Egypt. He's supposed to be betrayed by a friend at some point. And then he's going to be killed. And then he's going to be raised from the dead. Now, I'm leaving out some. But you can't help but admit how general those prophecies are. So, a Galilean man who is, do I think that? I absolutely think that's general. But besides the miraculous prophecies, just leave out the miraculous prophecies real quick. We're going to get to that later. But if we take out the miraculous prophecies, majority of those prophecies are very general. So a Jewish Galilean man who is going to be in Egypt and then going to come back to Israel and then going to be betrayed by a friend at some point in his life and then is killed. You're not saying that's general?
When you have hit that mute button again. Thank you. No, not really. Okay, I think the fact that a Jew brings the entire world basically into the knowledge of the God of Israel is very, very low. Okay, so how big were the Jews in the first century? Like, what was their population? Not huge. Okay, let's just say, I don't know, a couple million, maybe. I don't know the exact figure off the top of my head. All right, so here's something. This is Isaiah 49, 6-7. He says, it is too light a thing of you that you shall be my servant to raise up the tribes of Jacob, to bring back the preserved of Israel. I will make you a light to the nations, that my salvation will reach to the end of the earth. Thus says the Lord, the Redeemer of Israel, and his Holy One, to the one deeply despised, abhorred by the nation. The servant of rulers, kings shall see and arise, princes shall prostrate themselves, because the Lord who is faithful, the Lord, the Holy One of Israel, has chosen you. Okay, so what do we see here in this particular text, right? There's a guy who's going to be known as the servant of the Lord, who I also believe is described in Isaiah chapter 53. I know there are people that will push back on this and say, oh, no, well, he's talking about Israel. Israel is actually the servant of the Lord. Well, okay, but he raises up the tribes of Jacob and brings back the preserved of Israel. So he's bringing a remnant, at least, of Israel back to the knowledge of the God of Israel. So Israel can't be doing that to Israel. That's nonsensical, right? He's also rejected by the nation, right? Which in this context here is Israel, okay? And so, give me 1 second here. I got something up here. I'm trying to look at the exact odds here.
So,
hold on 1 second.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just looking something up. So you have this tiny nation, right? Israel is known for what? Like nothing. Okay. They're this nobody nation. Nobody really likes them. Okay. I'm trying to find this specific thing here. There we go. All right. I have to look up my own writing sometimes. Others' writings, friends of mine. Okay, so then Jesus also says this. He makes this prediction, right? That the gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations, which is saying something very similar to this. Okay, there's going to be this servant. He's going to be a light to all nations. His salvation will reach to the end of the earth, but he will be also rejected by his very own nation, right? And so let's see. He's the promised Messiah, okay, on this hypothesis. He's bringing representatives of all nations to the world of the worship of the God of Israel. Okay, the world used to worship what? The Romans worshipped Jupiter and, all these different pagan gods, right? The world was primarily pagan, with the exception of the Jews and like a few random monotheist philosophers here in Greece, here and there, okay? And so how many Jews were there at this particular time? Not a whole lot. And who else, what other Jew do you know has brought the whole world, basically a huge chunk of the world, to this worship of Israel, who is also rejected by his nation, right? And so this alone, I think, is actually pretty powerful. And then this same kind of prophecy is made in Psalm 22. What does Jesus quote when he's on the cross? My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me from the words of my groaning? Now, according to the Babylonian Talmud, the rabbis would sometimes just quote one verse, and that means they're alluding to the whole psalm. And so what do we see in this particular psalm? We see somebody who says, I'm a worm, I'm not a man. I'm scorned by mankind, despised by the people. All who see me mock me. They make mouths at me. They wag their heads. He trusts in the Lord. Let him deliver him. Let him rescue him, for he delights in him. Right. And so it says that, let's move on here. He was basically surrounded by many bulls encompassing him. Strong bulls of Bashan surround me. They open their wide mouth at me like ravening and roaring lion. Basically, he's being metaphorical here, but enemies are surrounding me, right? I am poured out like water. All my bones are out of joint. Well, if you're being crucified, your bones are going to be out of joint. My heart is like wax. Okay. When you are being crucified, that is extremely hard on your heart. And that's a lot of times what ends up killing people. It is melted within my breast. My strength is dried up like a potsherd, and my tongue sticks to my jaws. You lay me in the dust of death. So here is this person who is being laid in the dust of death. They're at death's door, and in death's door, their bones are out of joint. Their heart is like wax, and they're surrounded by their enemies. And he says, they pierced my hands and my feet. Now, I understand the Masoretic text says, like a lion, they were at my hands and my feet. If a lion is at your hands and your feet, well, they're biting your hands and your feet. They're piercing your hands and your feet. I can count on my bones. They steer and gloat over me. They divide my garments among them and and for my clothing, they cast lots. That's something that's historically defensible that did happen in the Gospels, apparently. Okay, now you could go, okay, whatever. I don't know. Maybe the Gospel writers, they wrote this blah, blah, blah. They read this. They knew about Jesus' crucifixion, and they connected the dots, and they had Jesus say this. Uh-oh, my guy dropped out. Well, I'll finish my point. I don't know. I was going to have to close this down anyways. Maybe he'll come back. Hope he's listening. But get this. This is the point. This is the big point, right? So here is the servant of the Lord. There he is. There's Dwayne. Dwayne. All right.
I am not sure why it kicked me out. But,
yeah, I didn't do it. I didn't do it.
But well, one second though.
Well, hold on. Let me finish this point real quick, and then you can say whatever you want.
I'm trying to figure out what your point is.
That's what I'm getting to. Getting into it right now. This is the point. Okay. Besides this, I believe very accurately describing somebody who is surrounded by their enemies and being crucified, probably, or something very similar to it, being laid into the dust of death. Here it is at the end. All the ends of the earth shall remember and turn to the Lord. All the who? All the ends. Who worships Yahweh? Only Israel worships Yahweh, right? And maybe like a few Jewish converts, very tiny minority. Most people in Greco-Roman society are not converting to Judaism. They were not making a lot of converts. All the families of the nations shall worship before you. For kingship belongs to the Lord. He rules over the nations. And the prosperous of the earth shall eat and worship before him. They shall go down to the dust. And everyone who shall not keep himself alive, posterity shall serve him. And it will be told of the Lord to a coming generation. They shall proclaim his righteousness to a people unborn, that he has done it. So here is this same picture that we just saw in Isaiah. Somebody, a Jew, a very small race that wasn't really well known, one of the few monotheists, his death, his suffering, his agony, his heart melting in his chest like wax, his bones being spread out, him being pierced in his hands and his feet, and crying out, my God, why have you forsaken me? And having his garments being gambled over, which I believe definitely did happen. And there's historical reasons for that besides just it's in the Gospels, okay? Out of this guy, the entire world comes to this knowledge and remembers and turns to the Lord, and families of nations worship before you. Well, like, this is somebody who Jesus has brought his saving message to all the worlds through the message of the apostles and the church after him. This is spread everywhere. Okay. And so almost everywhere people know of Christianity, and it's still like the majority view and has been the dominant religion for thousands of years. And so like, it's hard for me to just say that this is just random. This has just happened by chance. And so, yeah, that's just two. I don't see that as just like sure, whatever. And we have all the other evidence that we do have in favor for Christianity. And I'm done. You can say whatever now. Sorry.
Well, again, the prophecy that you've described is very general. He's a Jew who's going to preach the Jewish word to the Jews and then die for it. Now,
what other look? But what I'm saying is, look around you. What other Jew has been rejected by his very own nation?
The Old Testament is all about Jewish prophets that are trying to preach the word of God, and some even die for it. And a lot of them are rebelled against. A lot of them are denied. So we can't really say, well, name another Jew that tried to preach the word of God and then got rebelled against and denied. Well, that's the entire Old Testament.
And brought the nations, the pagans, into the worship of the
So you're saying that every nation worships Jesus?
How many billions of Christians have existed since the time of Jesus that have turned from, that would have worshipped probably pagan gods or not Yahweh at all over the past centuries? Without Jesus, would we even really know a whole lot about the God of Israel?
I'm not saying that a lot of people haven't converted. I'm not saying that Jesus wasn't a good rabbi. I'm just saying you're saying the whole world, because it's saying the whole world and all nations.
All the ends of the earth shall remember, right? And in the previous chapter,
that has not happened.
Okay, so it's somewhat, I'm sure, hyperbolic, but think about it. Communist China has millions of Christians in an underground church. South America has millions of Christians. Okay, so that's Asia, that's South America. Africa has more Christians in probably America and Europe combined. All right, millions. We're talking millions of Christians. Okay, Europe was largely Christian for centuries. Okay, and so that's pretty much all the ends of the earth. I've just named every continent. Australia, very Anglican, and still to this day there are millions of Christians.
So if like a part of a civilization of that nation worshipped Jesus in some way, that counts as Jesus affected that nation?
Dude, you are living and breathing in a Christian society right now, dude. Like if you read Tom Holland's Dominion, even Bart Ehrman, an extremely antagonistic biblical critic who doesn't believe Jesus is God or trusts the Gospels, is writing a book about how Christianity has affected the world positively. And has atheists on Twitter yelling at him over it because it's making him mad. He admits that yes, we live in a Christian culture. Our culture, our Western society, the values that we have for the poor, for children, for women, for a lot of the reform that we have is because of a Christian society. So you have Tom Holland, who is not a believer. He's a historian, has written a book called Dominion where he outlines all of this and the benefits of Christianity.
But I'm just saying. So,
and then you have Bart Ehrman, a biblical critic, who's yeah, Tom's right, and I'm writing a book on it too. Yeah, I don't think you realize how Christian you are.
No, I'm saying, you're saying that as long as a civilization in that nation worship Jesus, that counts as Jesus affected that nation. And then you pointed to America being a Christian country.
I'm not just pointing to America. I'm pointing to the West, period, and everything that's been influenced by the West. The West is the one who sent missionaries to China, to sent them to Africa, that sent them to South America, that sent them to America to begin with.
Well, the problem with that is you got to then prove that they stayed with Christianity throughout those years. So you mentioned Africa, you mentioned Asia, you mentioned, other nations.
So I'm not saying that in order for the prophecy to be fulfilled, that every single human being on the face of the planet,
if they did it at some point, it fulfilled the prophecy. If they worship Jesus at some point, you count that as, yeah, that fulfilled the prophecy.
If all the ends of the earth includes multiple continents, and then yeah, I'm saying, and we have billions and billions of Christians over the century, about a Jew who would be rejected by his own people, and yet the nations would stop worshiping their pagan gods and turn to the God of Israel and come to his knowledge. I would say that's evidence in favor for Christianity. That's positive
If that
evidence.
nation no longer supports Christianity or no longer has Christian values, would you then say that, oh no, that nation doesn't count anymore?
These are things that already happened. I feel like now it's almost like you're being weirdly, like it's got to be like, this is what I am going to interpret the text as saying, and so therefore it's got to come up.
No,
to
I'm just trying to figure out how you're interpreting the prophecy.
All the ends of the earth.
It says all the ends of the earth.
Lord. Yeah,
right. But I'm saying
nations,
that
families
nation.
of the nations. So he's saying the Gentiles. Okay, if you're a Jew and you're reading this, and this is 1,000 years before Christ, and you're reading this, that somebody is going to be rejected, and that the Gentiles are going to come worship God, you're going to go, yeah, I don't think so. Like that seems like a real big long shot at the time, right? And so, yeah, I think that's pretty striking. And then we've seen over the course of history, billions of Christians on multiple continents affecting the culture in ways that a lot of people just don't even realize. Yeah, I think that counts. I don't see why that wouldn't count.
No, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying if you're saying that if the nation did worship Christianity, I'm saying if that nation has since has derailed from that, has no longer worshiped Jesus, has no longer had Christian values, does that nation now then no longer count?
These nations, for the most part, still have Christian values. That's why we do things for the poor. That's why we build orphanages. That's why we build hospitals. That's why we do a lot of these things. And so I don't know. I don't think it's that difficult. I'm gonna have to wrap it. And so I guess I'm just not seeing why you're not seeing it. To me, I think this is striking evidence. And so what I would recommend for you to do, Dwayne, is based on our conversation, I would say become as well of an informed critic of Christianity as you can by studying what evidence we do have for the reliability of the Gospels. Read everything that you can, or get more information about this, because some of these objections that you're coming at with me are kind of crazy. And even in the comments, I'm like, people are like, is bro trolling right now? So I don't mean that to offend you or anything, but like,
just real quick before I go, what was crazy?
What is what? I didn't say anything was crazy. Did I say crazy?
Oh no, not crazy, but like, what was like the what I was pushing that you were like, huh?
Well, because you flip back and forth to like, well, I'm not really saying that they were willing to lie, but wouldn't they be motivated? Like, okay, saying, for example, when anytime I hear somebody say, well, even Muslims are willing to die for their faith. Okay, but there's a big difference between being a witness and being willing to die, and just believing something and being willing to die. And so that's like just kind of like apologetics 101 that you would just hear on any, random short late at night, just flipping through on any apologetics channel. You said things like, that was just one of them. That was just kind of, for me, like, okay, well, there's a big difference there. This is a big distinction. Okay. Now you're coming up with this real kind of crazy criteria. Like, well, what if these nations like don't really worship Jesus and like, it's different now. It's like, that's still
I'm genuinely asking. No, that's just a genuine question, because I'm just trying to understand the prophecy. So all the ends of the earth, I understand. The nations would then no longer worship their pagan gods and go to Jesus.
Is this evidence? At least you don't have to say this by itself makes Christianity true, but can you at least admit that this is like some kind of an evidential chip in favor?
No, it is evidence. I'm just saying it is evidence. But I'm just saying, if it did not age well, then what has it become then?
It's aged pretty well.
Okay then. All right then.
Yeah, I would say that it's still aged pretty well. I mean, even right now, like Gen Z is themselves, there's a huge uptick in people who are interested in Christianity, people who are going to church regularly. Africa is massively evangelized. Communist China is being still massively evangelized. And so, yeah, I don't see it. If you're like kind of saying, well, maybe in the future people will turn away. I mean, look at Europe. They're kind of going a little kooky. I mean, you even have church attendance in some among young people in the UK going up and different things like that. And so, yeah, anyways, like I said, if you're going to be a critic of Christianity, like the best thing to do is like just become as well of an informed critic as you can. So just read both sides. I'd encourage you to read both sides, study the evidence for and against, and then because if this is true, this is immensely important, and I think you would agree with that. So,
all right, thank you very much for having me on your show. I just want to say real quick to the comments, I am not trolling. I would not waste his time. I would not waste my time to come up on this panel to just troll. No, these are genuine questions.
Yeah, Dwayne, I don't think that you were, and I really appreciate the questions. I guess I got a little like, when you were like, well, all the nations like does it have to be, and I thought you were making it super specific into something that maybe you weren't, and I just misunderstood you. So if I did, that's on me, and I apologize. So, all right, man. Thanks for calling in.
All right. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too, man. Thanks. All right. Why do Christians fear me? I pity you, religious nuts, says Mike Debo. I pity you. I pity the fool. You religious nuts. My superior intellect. Doesn't the Bible say not to worry? I don't know what this guy's doing right now. Maybe he's joking. Bible thumpers are afraid. Mike, I'm going in a live chat. I'm going to own these guys by talking about how great I am. William says, let's pray for Nigeria. Our brothers need us, certainly. Yes, they do. So our church actually has sent a missionary to Nigeria. Thankfully, they're in the more southern part of Abuja, which is pretty much safe, although the government is pretty corrupt over there. And they also are pioneering a church in Lagos. But northern part of Nigeria, it's just crazy right now. Churches are just being destroyed. And it's crazy that there are people that just want to downplay it. It's like, this has nothing to do with Islam at all. And so, yeah, we definitely need to be praying for our Nigerian brothers. More attention needs to be brought to this. I appreciate somebody like Bill Maher, an atheist who doesn't even believe Jesus existed, being like, hey, like, what is going on here? So I pray that changes. I'm going to have to wrap this up. I'd love to talk to more of you guys. I see 3 people waiting. I apologize. I just got to tell my kids goodnight, and I got to wrap things up too, because I got to go to work and all of that jazz. But I appreciate you guys joining the live. I'm sorry it was a little slow at the beginning. We'll read a couple super chats and we'll be done. Michael Hilliard, good evening, brother. Do you have a set schedule and time when you go live, or is it still in development? It is still kind of in development. I have a newborn. He's going to be 4 weeks old on Saturday. And so, yeah, that has become a little, made it a little difficult to schedule, because sometimes I'm just like, man, I'm tired. Like I wanted to do them every Tuesday night and maybe every Thursday or Friday night. But right now it's on hold. So the plan is to eventually have a schedule. But while I'm adjusting to baby and I'm helping my wife a little extra, I'm going to have to kind of hold off and just do them when I can and when I have the energy. But I'll try to post them on the community post. So just make sure you subscribe. Also, be sure to like this stream. That helps the reach. And like when they are live. I should have said that earlier. I have a note in front of me to remind me of that, but I forgot to say it. But yeah, just keep an eye on the community tab. Keep an eye on your subscriptions tab. And I will try to share them out as quickly as I can. And then, yes, they will eventually be scheduled. And so, Gabriel Valencia, love your content, how you engage. God bless. God bless you, my brother in Thug Life. I appreciate that. So, all right, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining. Again, if you like these, hit the like and be sure to share these and then share them out. Maybe if you're in a Discord group or whatever, and you see that I'm going live and you got friends that you've been trying to talk to and you think they'll join the live and step up and make some good arguments, or ask good questions, by all means, send them my way. One last thing, while everybody's jumping off, I should have said this a little bit earlier too. Be sure to check out talkaboutdoubts.com. It's a ministry that I am a part of. It's founded by my friend Jonathan McClatchy. And basically it is, we do Zoom calls, one-on-one calls, two-on-one calls, with people who are experts in their field. So we have people who are experts in New Testament, people who are experts in philosophy, people who are experts in science, who will talk to you about any doubts that you have under the sun. And so there's a form that you could fill out. So if you are a Christian and you have doubts, and you just are sick of wrestling with them and you would like some help, please realize you do not have to go it alone. There are people who are willing to talk to you one-on-one, two-on-one. We have all kinds of great counselors, like Tim McGrew. He's a philosopher at Western Michigan. Wes Huff was a counselor for a while. I think he's gotten a little busy with his, everything that he's doing, but he's been a counselor. We have Doug Groothuis, who used to teach at Denver Seminary, philosophy professor. Stephen Meyer, the guy who wrote Signature in the Cell. Maybe some of you have heard of him. He's got an awesome YouTube channel himself, intelligent design guy. He's one of them, and just many, many, many more. And so be sure to avail yourself to that great resource. And with that, I'm out. I hope you have a great rest of your night, and we'll see you on the next one.